Chapter 1241. The battle that took place on the lake of Blueberry Manor was also reflected in the hall of the Wizard Association. Countless wizards of the association were silently watching the battle through the crystal screen. Olivier was definitely not the strongest among the elders, but with his reputation of killing witches, it was not a problem for him to be in the top 10. However, this legendary fire wizard was able to suppress Olivier on the battlefield by himself and even made her vomit blood. Didn't this mean that in terms of combat power, he was superior to most of the elders of the association? Heavy breathing sounds could be heard in the hall of the association, and the atmosphere suddenly became heavy and oppressive. "Henry, get involved." Domner's voice sounded. "We must not sit back and watch a wizard from the central continent ride over the heads of the wizards of the association and stop their duel." Henry, who had already arrived at the AC mountain range, immediately took a step forward. His violent and tyrannical aura was like a mountain that slowly pressed down on the battlefield. The two people in the middle of the battlefield immediately reacted. "Another Tier 4 sorcerer has arrived?" Grimm wasn't confident that he could continue fighting Olivier under the watch of a Tier 4 wizard. Therefore, he used Flame Leap several times in a row to avoid Olivier's aura attacks and quickly teleported to the edge of the lake. He also summoned the Shadow Fiend back to his side. Olivier had obviously gone all out, but at this time, the duel was interrupted by one of her own. This made her furious, and she roared at the bald man who was slowly approaching from the distant sky. "This is my battle. Henry, if you dare to interfere in our battle, I will not let you off." Looking at the frenzied witch whose body was covered with burn marks, Henry, who was a body-refining sorcerer, couldn't help but let out a cold snort. "Olivier, this is the will of all the elders of the association. What? Do you want to make everyone your enemy?" Olivier raised his head and let out an enraged roar that sounded like that of a wounded beast. His face, which had been blackened by fire, revealed a hint of hatred and malevolence. "This is my battle. I didn't lose. I didn't lose. You bastards, why did you interfere in my battle? I still have the gravity scale. I still have the gravitational killing array. I will crush that guy into mincemeat. You stole my victory." But even though he was angry, he couldn't continue this battle. Although Olivier still had the strength to fight, the arrival of Henry also caused Grimm to be on high alert. Even if Olivier used his life and reputation as a guarantee, there was no way Grimm could continue this battle under the watchful eyes of a Grade 4 wizard. Just like that, an evenly matched battle came to an end. When the two of them returned to the shore of the lake behind them was already full of scars. It had become a land of death that no living creature dared to set foot in. The surface of the lake, which originally looked like a huge emerald, was now covered in wildfire. Everywhere, one could see the burning surface of the lake, as well as the broken and bleeding void. At this moment, the boundary between water and fire was no longer so clear. Many flames were still burning on the surface of the water, as if they were using the lake water as fuel. The broken void flowed with a strange, dazzling, blood-like light, drifting slowly with the night wind, like a blurred and illusory ribbon of light. It had to be said that the battle between the two Grade 4 wizards had seriously affected the void near the giant lake, causing the planar laws here to distort and mutate. The aftermath of their battle would also affect this space for a long time, causing the entire giant lake and even the surrounding area to be shrouded in a kind of transmutation law. This terrible effect could last for days or even months. As for when it would disappear, it would depend on how much the battle had distorted the planar laws here. It was said that magi who had crossed the threshold of Grade 4 could cause the planar laws to tremble with a wave of their hand. With a flip of their palm, they could completely distort or rewrite the planar laws of an area. They could create a volcano in the depths of the ocean, build a city in the sky that would never fall from the sky, and build a beautiful garden in a land of ice where all life was extinct. The laws were their toys, and also their weapons. They could use the power of their laws to forever rewrite the planar laws of an area, allowing their influence to continue for millions of years. This kind of terrifying power was naturally something that Grade 4 Magi could never compare to. All planes would do their best to expel those who were Grade 4 and above from their space. The most fundamental reason was that their existence would severely affect the operation of the planar laws. If they were allowed to do as they pleased, the collapse of the planar system was only a matter of time. However, for some powerful Grade 4 Magi, especially those who had grasped the deeper layers of the planar laws, the world will's rejection of them would become stronger and stronger. This rejection would reach its peak when they advanced to Grade 5, until they could no longer bear it and had no choice but to voluntarily leave this world that did not welcome them. Therefore, those Grade 4 Magi who lived comfortably in the Magus world often had low potential and had no chance of advancing to Grade 5. True powerhouses would probably feel the disgust of the planar world the moment they advanced to Grade 4. Although the battle at the giant lake did not determine a victor, Olivier's sorry state was clear to everyone. After venting his anger by torturing a witch to death, he angrily accepted this outcome. The three of them returned to Blueberry Manor and sat down in a secret room. Although Olivier's gaze towards Grimm was still filled with anger and resentment, in terms of attitude and demeanor, she seemed much calmer. At the very least, she was no longer arrogant and domineering. Instead, there was a hint of equality and respect. As a combat which had fought her way up, she had always disdained those who only knew how to hide behind their summoned beasts or wizard beasts to cast spells. On the contrary, people like Grimm, who were strong and straightforward, were more to her liking. However, after this battle, although they respected each other, the hatred between them had also been formed. For Olivier, the most important thing to her was the face that she had lost to Grimm. She was still brooding over this battle. She felt that she didn't even have time to use her killer moves before they were intercepted by the hateful Henry. However, she didn't know that Grimm felt the same way. Focusing crystal, Vulcan bead, water soul jade. None of these things could be easily revealed. They were all trump cards that Grimm had carefully prepared for his enemies. In the face of a witch who could only injure but not kill, these killing weapons were useless. Being able to suppress the opponent was the best Grimm could do. After all, he came to the Wizard Association to solve a problem, not to turn it into a deadlock. As soon as he sat down, Grimm couldn't help but ask, "I'm Henry, one of the elders of the association." The bald Henry seemed to be in high spirits. It seemed that he was very excited about Olivier's humiliation. On the other hand, the witch who torture murder was sitting at the side with a face full of anger. She looked at the two of them with eyes full of hatred. About the deal between me and Lord Olivier. Grimm was still the most concerned about this issue. The battle is not over, so naturally, the deal cannot continue. Olivier's face was so dark that ink could drip out. "Unless you defeat me, I will never hand over the divine stone of light." Grimm's thick eyebrows furrowed, and his expression became somewhat fierce. Don't worry," Henry hurriedly interjected. "Before I came here, Lord Domner had already said that he would like to invite Lord Grimm to the association headquarters for a tour. There are many wizards there who can't wait to meet Lord Grimm. I don't think you will refuse, right?" Although the other party's attitude was very humble, the confidence and determination in his tone caused Grimm to frown. "Since Lord Domner has invited me, of course, I will not refuse. However, the main purpose of my visit this time is to— Lord Grimm, our Wizard Association is full of talented people and abundant resources. A mere divine stone of light is not something we can't find. Since you have come here, are you worried that you will return empty-handed?" Henry took the initiative to persuade Grimm. Since the other party had put it this way, there was no room for Grimm to refuse. Besides, it was rare for him to come to the eastern part of the continent, which was also known as the Wizard's Paradise. Being able to visit the headquarters of the Wizard Association would allow him to have a deeper understanding of the power of the largest wizard organization in the wizard world. Grimm no longer hesitated and finally nodded silently. "Because I was in a hurry to come here, I abandoned my carriage in the manor. So, Is there any problem with borrowing your airship from the association headquarters? This time, Henry's target was not Grimm, but the owner of this place, Olivier. Olivier hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded in agreement. She made a circle with her hands, and a ball of blue light condensed in the center of her palm. Her lips moved slightly, and she silently communicated with it for a moment before waving her hand and dispersing it. "Let's go, my airship is ready. We can depart now." A moment later, a silver-white airship slowly rose into the sky from the depths of the AC Mountains. The shuttle-shaped body slightly adjusted the direction of the airship and flew at high speed towards the southeast area. Chapter 1242. Just like the other regions, the Sorcerers' Association also had a vast piece of land. However, in terms of area and population, this land was obviously not as rich and full of vitality as the Central Continent. Flying high in the sky, looking down at the earth, everything on the ground became small and blurry. Inside the association's territory, there were still large areas of virgin forest. Although it wasn't as scary as the Black Forest, it was still full of unpredictable risks. From this height, the human settlement was only the size of a fingernail, scattered around the white towers. The towers were slender and towering. From afar, they looked like wooden sticks stuck straight into the ground. Their surface was still overflowing with dazzling colors. When Grimm stood on the side of the ship and looked at the land below him, the wizard named Henry came to his side. "That's the Northern Territory, the coldest area in the entire association's territory." Henry pointed to the north and said with a sigh. Grimm looked to the north and could clearly see the dark green forest below him growing darker and darker as it extended northwards. In the far north, he could vaguely see the snow-covered mountains and forests. About 13,000 miles to the east is the turbulent Black Reef Sea, and to the south is the terrible Black Forest, which stretches for hundreds of thousands of miles. Henry said indifferently, "Tens of thousands of years ago, a dozen wizards came from the Central Continent and set up the first human camp here. After years of hard work and life and death struggles, the wizards of the association conquered this land and turned it into the cradle and paradise of the wizard community. With regard to this, every magus in the association is proud of it." Grimm was naturally familiar with the history of the Wizard Association. But now, after listening to a wizard from the association narrate it in a sacred tone, Grimm could still feel the ups and downs of the process and the difficulty of getting the results he wanted. "Your Excellency, look around. Every wizard tower belongs to the Wizard Association." A female voice came from his side. Olivier also walked out of the cabin and came to the side of the two. "In this place, wizard families are not allowed to build wizard towers. All wizard towers can only be the private property of the association. Any wizard family that violates the rules will be expelled from the association's territory. On this point, the association is the complete opposite of your scattered towers." Hearing Olivier's disdainful comment, Grimm's face revealed a helpless, bitter smile. Every system and mode of survival had its own reason for existence. The Central Continent was the first human territory to be developed and built in the wizard world. The land there was fertile, abundant, and had a large population. Coupled with the vast area, it was easy to give birth to small wizard families that could support themselves. In the absence of powerful wizards, ordinary wizard families could also rely on wizard towers to fight against high-grade wizards. This made the unification of the Central Continent extremely difficult. That was why for tens of thousands of years, the scattered towers of the Central Continent had always been a pile of loose sand. No one had ever been able to unify all the wizard families and form a true force. The three big wizard organizations in the West, North, and East were large organizations established by wizards who had migrated from the Central Continent after experiencing many ups and downs. Due to the difficulties at the beginning, they had to stick together and rely on their collective strength to fight the terrifying magic beasts in the Black Forest for survival. This kind of arduous training also tempered their physique and temperament. In terms of combat power, the quality of the wizards cultivated by the three big wizard organizations was far above the wizards of the Central Continent. This was also the main reason why the wizards of the Association had always looked down on the wizards of the Central Continent. In the past few thousand years, the three big wizard organizations' territories had expanded. Only the Central Continent had maintained its original state, with no obvious territorial expansion. From this, it could be seen that the wizards of the Central Continent were living a comfortable life, so comfortable that they did not want to make progress. The territory of the Central Continent was too large, and it was divided into more than 30 different regions with different styles and different people. The Wizard Association's territory was only about a fifth of the Central Continent, and it had also divided it into more than 10 different regions. However, the actual control of these regions was still firmly in the hands of the Association. The way the Association controlled the area was through the tall and imposing Magus Towers. All the wizard towers belonged to the Association. Any wizard or acolyte from the Association could freely visit any wizard tower if they chose to travel in the Association's territory and obtain the necessary supplies and support. It was because of this selfless learning and nurturing atmosphere that many acolytes and wizards had a strong sense of trust and belonging to the Association. When they traveled in this vast and boundless land to learn, they represented the Wizard Association and the will of all the wizard towers. At this time, the wizard family's sense of existence was abnormally small, even to the extent that they were comparable to the human nobles. Therefore, the wizards in the eastern part of the continent were first wizards of the Association, then members of certain families. What they were proud of was usually the former, while the latter was only used to mark their origins. At this moment, facing the two proud wizards of the Association, Grimm could only smile helplessly. After all, when it came to the sense of honor and belonging, the scattered tower forest could not catch up to the Wizard Association. 7 days later, after a long journey that spanned tens of thousands of miles, the airship finally entered the core of the Association's territory, the Yazar Province. The Yazar Province was the main base of the Wizard Association, and it was also the largest and most abundant region among the 11 territories. It was densely populated, and there were many residential areas. It was far from the cold and murderous atmosphere of the peripheral areas. After the airship emerged from the sea of trees, it was greeted by the sight of towering Magus Towers. These wizard towers were built in a ring shape, surrounding the main living areas of the Yazar Province, making it abnormally safe and peaceful. At the center of all the towns and residences was an especially tall wizard tower that pierced through the clouds, standing perfectly straight there. Every living being that laid eyes on it felt a special sense of insignificance. The core of the Wizard Association, the Overlook Tower. Even though Grimm had never been there, he had read many descriptions and praises of this Overlook Tower in many books. This was a wizard palace that gathered the wisdom and skills of all wizards. This was a mysterious tower that carried the dreams and ideals of tens of thousands of wizards. This was the backbone of a Magus that supported the majestic world, compared to the Sky City of the Silver Alliance. The Overlook Tower was not inferior at all. Instead, it had a strange feeling that encouraged and inspired the many wizards of the Association. There was a rumor among many wizards that there was a magical door of light at the top level of the Overlook Tower. After all the wizards of the Association surpassed the threshold of level 4, they would reluctantly cross the door of light and go to the outside world to find their new territory and shelter. Therefore, the door of light was given a mysterious color by many wizards. It was as if any wizard who was lucky enough to cross the door of light could smoothly advance to level 4 and become one of the great wizards. Of course, this rumor could not be trusted. However, when Grimm saw the giant tower with his own eyes, he could not help but look through the thick layer of clouds to the top of the tower. He secretly tried to figure out the appearance and style of the door of light. Most of the airships could only land near the wizard's pagoda and could not enter the core area. Among the many airships, Only a few could pass through the blockade of the wizard's pagoda and fly directly to the majestic tower in the center area. Facing Grimm's questioning gaze, Henry smiled and explained, "There's a no-fly zone near the Association's main encampment. Ordinary airships and flying mounts are not allowed to fly here. However, the elders of the Association have the privilege of flying directly to the overlooked tower, so we can save ourselves the trouble of changing mounts." Grimm nodded in understanding after hearing this. The airship floated leisurely in the sky, leaving behind large tracts of farmland, human towns, and villages like molds engraved on the black soil. Soon, the majestic tower was right in front of them. The closer they got, the more they could feel the majesty and pressure of the giant tower. Finally, the airship slowly descended from the sky at a port 30 miles away from the overlooked tower. After a while, the few of them changed into black carriages and rushed to the entrance of the tower with the sound of wheels squeaking. The Buglich Bliss was also riding with Grimm. Suddenly arriving in a new area, the Buglich Bliss was especially excited and restless. His body, which was curled up in a seat, kept squirming and twisting under the black robe. He was excited as if he had gotten a new toy. Bliss turned to look at the faint red glow around the carriage, knowing that they were within the range of Grimm's flame barrier. Only then did he feel reassured and asked, "My lord, who won the battle between you and that witch?" "I didn't win or lose. Someone interrupted me," Grimm said calmly. "Then you should have a guess. Who won?" Ever since Bliss had advanced to level 3, his admiration and respect for Grimm had reached an unprecedented level. Hence, he was especially concerned about the outcome of the battle. "Let's split it 50-50. Grimm's attitude was indifferent. "If it's just a battle of victory and defeat, our strength is only 50-50. But if it's a battle of life and death, my chances of winning are slightly higher, about 70%. However, the other party must have some tricks up their sleeves, and I won't be able to escape the fate of being heavily injured." Chapter 1243. When Grimm and Bliss got off the carriage, they were immediately shocked by the magnificent tower in front of them. Magnificent, majestic, strange, mysterious. Countless praises and praises surged within their hearts, and they transformed into a warm torrent that flowed throughout their bodies, causing their hearts to surge with excitement and their emotions to surge. The overlooked tower's huge body shimmered under the warm sunlight. The base of the tower was not the traditional cylindrical shape, but a multi-body wizard's pagoda. Many strangely shaped giant rune stones with mysterious lines were floating high in the sky, slowly floating around the body of the tower along a strange route. Under the beautiful sunlight, the special green material refracted golden, dark blue, indigo, crimson, and other strange colors. In the sky, streaks of seemingly tangible rainbow bridges lingered and connected the various wizard pagodas. Within the transparent barrier of light, there was a massive amount of magical energy that would strike fear into the hearts of anyone who saw it. The main tower and the auxiliary tower were connected by countless air corridors and floating saucers. Outside the tower, there were also countless small balconies, flower halls, and botanical gardens of various sizes, all of which were covered by a layer of transparent light barrier. If someone with good eyesight looked down from above, they would be able to see wizards and apprentices moving slowly like ants inside the light barrier. Since there was a no-flying barrier around the overlooked tower, it also prohibited all unauthorized teleportation. So if one wanted to reach the top floor, they could only rely on their own feet. However, as a level 4 wizard, they could still enjoy a lot of convenience and privileges. As soon as Grimm and the others got off the carriage at the entrance of the giant tower, a 20-meter-wide floating saucer slowly landed. "Let's go, Wizard Grimm. Since you're here, why don't you let me show you around the Wizard Association?" Wizard Henry was very hospitable. However, Olivier was obviously a little impatient after torturing and killing the witch. "You guys take your time. I'm going to find someone to settle the score with." After saying that, her body exploded into a cloud of black smoke. When the smoke slowly dissipated, Olivier's figure had disappeared without a trace. "Follow me." Henry took the lead and stepped on the floating saucer, followed by Grim and Bliss. He didn't seem to do anything, but the flying saucer shook slightly and began to rise slowly. Countless wizards and acolytes were hurriedly walking in the square around the giant tower. They couldn't help but look up at the scene. In Grim's eyes, they were getting smaller and smaller. Gradually, they had shrunk into small black dots. Without the eagle eye, it was impossible to see their faces and figures clearly. As the flying saucer rose higher, the people and objects on the ground became smaller and smaller, but the things on the wizard's pagoda that they had to look up at previously became much closer. While the UFO was ascending, a huge rune stone flew past them, allowing Grim to feel a powerful and perfectly self-consistent energy system at close range. These rune stones should be part of the Overwatch Tower's defense mechanism. The purpose of their existence was to constantly monitor the surroundings of the tower for any abnormal spatial fluctuations and energy reactions. Once an abnormality was detected, the runestone could instantly transform into a terrifying firepower platform, destroying any possible intruders outside the giant tower. Although Grim had also collected some information related to the warning runestones, compared to the real runestones in front of him, what he had collected could only be regarded as trash. More importantly, these runic stones weren't isolated and helpless. Grim could sense that there was a huge and magnificent, mysterious soul on top of them, controlling everything. These runestones were nothing more than some of its eyes and tentacles. The Overwatch Tower must also have a tower spirit, and it must have an extremely high level of intelligence. The headquarters of the Wizard Association looked quiet and peaceful, like a holy land of learning and a playground. However, under Grim's special elemental vision, he could see energy torrents that ran through all areas, intersecting energy threads and layers of energy force fields that covered each other. If the runestones were tangible, then these things were intangible. The tangible and intangible stacked together to form a powerful defense system that covered the entire overlooked tower without any loopholes. The floating saucer was passing through these tangible and intangible energy fields, and it was always coupled with the surrounding defense mechanism. On the other hand, Wizard Horner's body was emitting a strange energy wave. Relying on this energy wave, the floating saucer was able to pass through the energy field and float in the air between the subtowers. The floating saucer was still circling around. When passing by the edge of subtower, Wizard Horner casually pointed at it and chuckled. "This is the breeding tower. The special wizard beast that the association needs can be customized here and cultivated on a large scale. Many times, we need them to destroy the native army of the other world." The surface of this subtower was khaki, and the top of the tower was covered with a transparent elemental light shield. Through the light shield, Grim could clearly see the huge and spacious strange space inside the tower. With the support of the strange space expansion technology, the space inside the tower was obviously much larger than what it looked like on the outside. The inside of the tower was isolated by a static light shield, and each space was filled with all kinds of strange magical beasts and terrifying monsters. There were many ant-like black dots moving around the edge of the space. They seemed to be professional wizards who were responsible for monitoring and controlling wizard beasts. The floating saucer only skimmed over the breeding tower, and Grim could only see the content inside. He couldn't see the progress of the Wizard Association's research in this area. Grim couldn't help but take the initiative to ask, "Wizard Horner, what kind of process does the association have to deal with the secondary plane?" "Why? Are you interested in this?" Horner chuckled. "Then I'll take you to the Tower of War." With that, the floating saucer turned and slowly flew towards another subtower in the distance. The Tower of War was actually a small wizard's pagoda that was split off from the Overwatch Tower. Although it was a small one, if it was placed in the scattered tower forest, it would probably be regarded as a large one. The Overwatch Tower had a total of 777 floors. The base of the Tower of War was split off from the 136th floor of the Overwatch Tower. Therefore, when the floating saucer slowly landed on an air platform of the Tower of War, it was already thousands of meters above the ground. Wisps of white clouds floated leisurely not far from the air platform, making this place look like a paradise on Earth. The air platform was not big, only about 100 square meters in size, and there were 4 metal puppets standing silently on it. When the floating saucer landed on the platform, the leading metal puppet shot out colorful rays from the honeycomb-like hole on its head. The other puppets stepped forward, raised their thick and heavy giant swords, and entered a state of alert. However, when the colorful rays of the leading puppet touched the layer of strange energy that lingered around Horner, all the alarm mechanisms were canceled. The few metal puppets returned to their original positions and turned into tall and mighty metal statues, remaining motionless. Let's go. I'll show you the internal facilities here. Horner took the lead and stepped on the bluestone path leading to the tower. This place was already thousands of meters above the ground, and a violent wind whistled through the tower. If an ordinary person were to walk on these bluestone paths that are less than 5 meters wide and can't see any skeletal support at the bottom, they would definitely be frightened. But for a high-grade wizard like Grimm, this kind of path was as calm and natural as walking on flat ground. Even when walking on the path, they could leisurely overlook the surrounding scenery. At the end of the path was a door of light, which perfectly isolated the inside and outside. Obviously, passing through this place requires a very high level of authority, but this is obviously not a problem for Horner, who has the status of an elder. As soon as the 3 of them arrived in front of the door of light, 3 holes the size of their bodies appeared on the door of light. When they stepped in, the door of light quickly closed behind them. Inside was a huge and spacious 3-dimensional space. Metal platforms were floating all over the tower, and on top of each platform, there was a strange door of light. Above each door of light, a series of numbers were marked with eye-catching, glowing runes. Plane number JY0367 has experienced a moderate level of rebellion. We have received a request for reinforcements from a Magi stationed there. Please prepare for battle, Bat Snake Squad. The next teleportation will begin in 25 seconds. As soon as Grimm set foot in this space, he heard the crisp and beautiful voice of a woman lingering in the tower. Then, a team of 11 wizards emerged from somewhere on the wall of the tower and stood on a small metal floating platform. A gigantic mechanical arm lifted a metal floating platform as it slowly moved through the tower. It passed through countless platforms and light doors before finally stopping in front of a platform labeled JY0367. The fully armed wizard team moved to the metal platform and stayed on it for a short while. Under the leadership of a wizard, they entered the light door in an orderly manner. Apart from this instantaneous teleportation, there were also countless mechanical arms in the Tower of War lifting metal platforms up and down, with 1 or more figures of Magi standing on top of each platform. After they arrived at the light door of the plane they wanted to go to, they took out a golden token and touched it. The dark light door suddenly came to life. Once the light gate was completely stabilized, they entered it one after another and disappeared without a trace. This is the Tower of War of our Magus Association. Every light door corresponds to a conquered secondary plane. As long as they send an application to the association, any Magus could easily cross the space between planes and go to another secondary plane to explore and search. The spoils of war will also belong to you. Horner proudly introduced to Grimm. Grimm's heart trembled as he looked around. There were more than 400 to 500 large and small light doors in this space. Chapter 1244. These should be small to medium-sized planes that have already been conquered. In that case, how does your association deal with those troublesome large planes? After holding in for a long time, Grimm finally couldn't help but ask this question that had been bottled up in his heart for a long time. After all, the top-level resources that could be seized from small to medium-sized planes were too little. It might be more than enough to support 1 or 2 wizards or a small wizard family, but it was still not enough to support a large organization. Therefore, if someone told Grimm that a large organization like the Wizard Association had started off by pillaging small and medium-sized planes, he would never believe it even if he was beaten to death. No matter how many small to medium-sized planes they invaded, they would only be able to fill their stomachs. If they wanted to eat until their mouths were full of oil, and if they wanted to expand their organization, they would have to invade civilizations that were as powerful as the wizard world. Hearing Grimm's question, Henry let out a sinister smile and went silent for a moment. It seemed like he was communicating with someone in the distance. Finally, he looked at Grimm once again. "You're very lucky. I don't know why, but the old man values you very much. He has made an exception and authorized me to take you to the upper level of the Tower of War. Come with me." As soon as Henry finished speaking, the metal floating platform under their feet was lifted by a thick metal mechanical arm and slowly rose to the upper floor of the Tower of War. The metal platforms were passed by one, and the colorful light door was left behind. The metal platform did not hesitate to jump up until it was stopped by a 3-meter thick metal barrier. "Lafardis, the old man, authorized me to take him to the upper level of the Tower of War. Get out of the way," Henry yelled. "Message is being communicated. Please wait." A crisp and sweet mechanical voice came from the void. It seemed like the high-grade tower spirit that was in charge of the entire tower had spoken. After a moment, the mechanical voice sounded again. "The authorization information has been confirmed. Welcome, Wizard Horner and Wizard Grimm. The rest of you, please stay behind." As soon as the mechanical voice finished, a dazzling white light hit the body of the insect lich, Bliss, who had been silent for a long time. The latter didn't even have the chance to scream before disappearing without a trace. Grimm's eyebrows twitched. "Please don't worry. The follower has been placed in the alternate dimension numbered DF-7710. There is no problem with his safety. When you leave the Tower of War, I will naturally release him again." Along with the mechanical voice's prompt, a magic mirror appeared, and the image displayed was that of Worm Lich Bliss, who was trapped in an empty alternate dimension. The latter was clearly panicking. He shook out countless tiny black insects from his black robe and searched for the gaps and exits in this white space. Grimm waved his hand and condensed a flame rune. Then, he whispered a few words. Bliss, who was trapped in the alternate dimension, was stunned. He listened attentively and finally gave up on his meaningless actions. He sat there cross-legged, silently waiting for the end of his sentence. The magic mirror disappeared. The thick metal barrier suddenly split into countless half-moon-shaped metal interlayers, slowly retreating into the wall of the tower, opening up a path to the upper floor. The floating platform continued to rise. This time, what appeared in front of Grimm was no longer a colorful door of light, but a terrifying scarlet blood door. A plain door. Grimm took a deep breath and slowly exhaled after a long while. The ones that appeared in the lower levels were all teleportation doors, but the ones that appeared here were all plain doors. The difference between the two was not just in name, but in essence. Teleportation doors were also a cheap method of teleportation. It used a strange spatial technique to forcefully open a simple wormhole between two planes. This way, people could use this wormhole to travel and replenish resources. However, because this method of teleportation was simple and cheap, the Magus had to endure a strong spatial repulsion during the process. This brought additional risks and pressure to the Magus. Moreover, this method of teleportation could easily be affected by the void tides. If they were to encounter a terrifying nether storm in the process of teleporting, then what awaited them would either be sucked into the nether storm or teleported to an unknown and bizarre place. Either of these two outcomes would be fatal to a low-ranked Magus. However, a plain door was a completely different story. The planar gate used superb spatial techniques and methods to build a passageway between two planes that could be used to travel between the two planes. The entire passage was protected by a spatial spell formation, so it was extremely safe. The construction of a plain door required a huge amount of rare resources, and not every plane was worth such an investment. In the entire upper level of the Tower of War, there were only 20 to 30 of these blood-red doors. Each of them occupied a large area, and from time to time, a strand of energy from another plane would leak out from the door made of special material that was covered with strange patterns. While Grimm and Henry were floating up, one of the blood-red doors was trembling violently, as if it was in the middle of a turbulent war. 5 wide metal escalators protruded from the wall of the tower, extending to the front of the blood-red door. A steady stream of terrifying wizard beasts and tall metal puppets were rushing into the light door one after another. That's the door to the world of light and dark. There are too many strange creatures that have mastered both the power of holy light and darkness. We've only built an outpost camp there, and it's still in a fierce battle. There are already 5 elders there, but even so, we can't repel the crazy attacks of the local creatures. The world of light and dark. What's the level of civilization there? Grimm asked curiously. It's the same level of civilization as our sorcerer world, only slightly behind us by a few thousand years. However, the power of their world is too simple, so it's not that difficult to deal with them. Grimm silently watched the wizard beasts and metal puppets pouring into the other world. From the speed at which they were being consumed, he could guess the intensity of the war on the other side of the blood-red door. If such a world was not difficult to deal with, then what level of war would be considered difficult? Grimm was lost in his thoughts as he felt sorry for the huge difference in power between the Tower Forest and the Wizard Association. With the power of the scattered towers, they would probably need to go all out to invade a medium-sized plane. On the other hand, the Sorcerer Association was able to divide a plane of the same size as the Sorcerer World without batting an eyelid. The huge difference in power made Grimm, who had the ambition to unify the entire central continent, a little discouraged. Moreover, since the Sorcerer Association was willing to take the initiative to invite him to see the secrets of their war, it meant that these things were not their core content. There must be more unfathomable things on top of these blood-red doors. However, Grimm knew what he was doing. As an outsider, if he didn't know what to do and wanted to see those places, it would be equivalent to forcing the Sorcerer Association to fall out with him. Therefore, Grimm finally nodded in satisfaction and thanked Wizard Horner with a smile. "You've seen the Tower of War. How about it? Let's take a look at our association's hall. There are a lot of elders there who want to meet you." Seeing Grimm nodding, Henry immediately relaxed. The metal floating platform immediately returned to the lower level of the Tower of War and picked up the imprisoned insect lich, Bliss. Afterward, he stepped out of the Tower of War and boarded the floating saucer, flying towards the Overwatch Tower's main tower. 15 minutes later, in a hall on the 327th floor of the main tower, Grimm finally met the dozen or so elders who had been waiting for him for a long time. This was a simple and plain witchcraft hall. A dozen or so Tier 4 wizards wearing different colored robes and armor were gathered in the hall, chatting in groups of 3 to 5. When Grimm and Henry stepped in, they stopped talking and looked at Grimm. Grimm immediately felt a heavy pressure pressing down on him. Everyone present was a Tier 4 wizard, and none of them were weak. Even if they didn't say anything and just looked at him, they could pour their powerful and terrifying mental strength into it, turning it into an invisible force that extended to Grimm's body. While they were staring at Grimm, they were also using their spirit tentacles to probe Grimm's secrets in a stealthy and obscure way. Grimm even smelled the disgusting scent of prophecy magic from a few of them. 16 Tier 4 wizards, 16 pairs of eyes, and 16 terrifying mental forces. If it were any other Tier 4 wizard, they would not necessarily be able to withstand such a probing attack without batting an eyelid. Grimm resisted the urge to take out his flaming coral magic wand, but he still had a smile on his handsome face. Raging fire energy gushed out of the heart of the rule, and the powerful power of the rule of fire transformed into strange runes that flowed into Grimm's consciousness. An indescribably terrifying burning will rose from Grimm's body and collided with the terrifying pressure formed by the Elder's consciousness. Both of them groaned in unison. The strange, oppressive feeling was instantly swept away. Grimm, who had entered the hall with Henry, paused slightly to alleviate the terrifying backlash. He then smiled and nodded at the elders. The dozen or so elders suddenly revealed strange expressions. Half of them were just strength doppelgangers, and their bodies even turned red as if the strange, scorching had invaded their bodies. Chapter 1245. Welcome. Welcome. An old sorcerer with a goatee on his chin and a pair of slightly closed eyes stepped forward to greet them. I'm Domhnall. Welcome, Lord Grimm. The rest of the Magi nodded their heads in greeting. That black-mouthed Olivier was among them, but he did not react to Grimm's arrival. Grimm hurriedly stepped forward and bowed to Wizard Domhnall as a junior would. This was not because Grimm was too humble, but because he had a deeper understanding of this old magus. Domhnall was the vice president of the Magus Union and was in charge of most of the daily affairs of the Union. He had been in this position for 1,200 years, but he had never made any unnecessary mistakes. Thus, there were many rumors about him in the outside world. The most convincing part was that this Domner was most likely a soul clone of a great mage of the association. For the sake of the Magus Union's long-term development, he was forced to stay in the Magus world and become a resident Magus in charge of daily affairs. This way, most of the Magus Union's Magus Union was freed up, and they could put all their energy and time into training and improving their personal strength. The deeper benefit was that the Magus Union was always under the control of a certain group, and it would not become a stage for the ambitious to fight. Domhnall was quite satisfied with Grimm's respect. He dragged Grimm around the hall and introduced him to all the Magi present. Jaredin, grade 4 elemental magus male. This was a powerful fellow dressed in a white robe. His entire body had transformed into a strange light element. His eyebrows, his skin, his flesh, and his bones were all nearly transparent. His internal organs and blood circulation could be seen at a glance. Even the surging light elements in his body were clearly visible. One could clearly see how they interacted with his flesh and blood. Since Jaredin had chosen such a strange form of light elements, he must have coveted the slight increase in his combat power after transforming his body into energy. However, this method of transforming one's body into energy had its pros and cons otherwise. Grimm would not be so obsessed with his human form. Ames, grade 4 bloodline wizard male. It was a strange guy with blue hair and blue eyes, with a strange magic halo around his body. As the other party had concealed the aura of the halo, Grimm could not estimate the specific effect of the halo just by looking at it. However, according to the AI chip's deductions, this was probably because the aura of the magical beast he had fused with was too strong, causing it to be unable to completely conceal the force field radiation. Neve, grade 4 bloodline sorcerer female. This was a strange witch with almost no hair. She was bald, had no eyebrows, and her skin was clean and smooth. However, there was a pair of green vertical pupils in her long and narrow eye sockets. As his pupils dilated, a cold, cruel, and terrifying aura arose spontaneously. The other party definitely possessed some kind of mutated snake bloodline. This could be sensed from the cold aura she emitted. However, currently, there were over 1,000 types of snake bloodlines, and, among them, there were close to 100 that could reach or exceed the 4th level. It would not be easy to find out who the other party was fusing with. With the addition of Henry and Grimm, the hall could easily accommodate 18 grade 4 sorcerers. If this were to happen in the central continent, it would be an appalling and terrifying matter. But here, it seemed so natural and casual. While Grimm was quietly recording and collecting the basic information of these grade 4 sorcerers, the elders of the association were also quietly peeking at Grimm's information. With the help of the mental network established by Raphatus, the elders of the association were able to block Grimm's spirit power and communicate with each other through a secret method. Olivier, you just exchanged blows with him. How is it? What level has his strength reached? Yeah, Olivier. That guy's been fighting with you for so long. You should be evenly matched, right? Olivier's face became gloomier after hearing the ridicule of his companions. He could not help but roar in anger. Schreiber, if your skills are as good as your mouth, go find that guy and have a one-on-one duel. He's also a fire wizard, and so are you. Let's see whose flames are more powerful. Camber, you bastard. Don't think that you can beat me with your double kill spell. If you have the ability, go challenge that fire wizard and see what happens. Seeing that Olivier was so angry that he almost lost his composure, more people came in through the spiritual communication. How come I heard that this guy named Grimm was not even 300 years old when he reached the 4th level? Is this true? Finally, a sharp male voice suddenly asked. I know that. The bloodline wizard named Ames said in a loud voice. I've been to the Central Continent a while ago, and I've taken the opportunity to learn more about Wizard Grimm's situation. According to the information he released to the public, the first time he appeared in front of people was when he became a Grade 1 sorcerer. It has only been 387 years since then. What about his birthplace? Does he have any relatives? Someone asked coldly. There's no way to find this information now. It said that when he was advancing, there was an accident at his family's resource point. All the acolytes, including the wizard stationed in the tower, died in an accident. Only he, a female witch, and an insect wizard survived, and all of them became sorcerers. Accidents? I'm afraid it's something related to the blood sacrifice. We've already talked to the Cerubo family about this, and we tried our best to get first-hand information. Indeed, this Grimm was taken in by the wizard stationed in the tower from a nearby village. There's no way to find out more about him. The wizard stationed in the tower wanted to use the blood sacrifice of all the acolytes to advance to the 2nd level, but he failed. Instead, he helped 3 of his acolytes. Failed? That's not necessarily true. From what I see, it must be this Grimm who played a trick on the magus in the tower. 387 years ago, he advanced to the 1st level. 316 years ago, he advanced to the 2nd level. 232 years ago, he advanced to the 3rd level. 94 years ago, he advanced to the 4th level. If we calculate according to this timeline, he should have been 300 years old when he advanced to the 4th level. There was a sudden silence in the spirit communication, and many magi could not help but furrow their brows. Although the speed of advancement could not be completely linked to one's battle prowess, the fact that he was able to stand out in the Central Continent all by himself showed that he had outstanding talent as a magus. Moreover, from his performance after advancing to the 4th level, it seemed that this was not the end. He still maintained a speed of advancement that left others in awe. Of course, this was not the first time they had met such a monstrous fellow who had advanced so quickly. More than 1,000 years ago, the Magus Cerubo, who had risen to power in the Central Continent, had been just as tyrannical and tyrannical. It was a pity that no matter how talented he was, he could not withstand the hidden obstructions of the 3 great Magus organizations. In the end, he was unable to unify the scattered towers, and could only advance to the 5th level and leave the Magus world. Now that he had become a great rank 6 Magus, he was doing very well in the Outlands. It was a pity that the Cerubo family he had left in the Magus world had only flourished for 300 to 400 years before declining once more. Of course, the biggest reason for this was that the great Magus Cerubo had too much control over the family's resources, which affected the family's future development. He had successfully advanced from the 5th level to the 6th level, but the family he had left behind had its resources sucked dry, and there was a clear gap in the number of high-ranked magi. If he had sucked less blood and given more to the younger generations of the family would not have become a middle-ranked family that could be bullied by anyone. It only took him 300 years to advance to the 4th level, and another 80 years to stabilize his spirit. His current battle prowess has even reached the standard of a high-ranked 4th level. This Grimm cannot be underestimated. This time, it was Blackhill, a powerful bloodline magus whose strength surpassed Olivier's. Olivier, don't be unconvinced. I know you still have some tricks up your sleeves, but this Grimm definitely has more than you do. If you really want to fight him to the death, you'll have to thank the heavens if you even have a 40% chance of winning. If killing the witch Olivier was enough to make him one of the top 10 elders of the association, then this Black Hill would definitely be in the top 5. Naturally, no one would doubt his words. A person who could successfully suppress and kill the witch Olivier was definitely worthy of the title of a super powerful being. If such a person was allowed to stir up trouble in the central continent, everyone's expression turned grim. Then what should we do with this Grim? Should we try to rope him in or think of a way to suppress him? Someone asked softly. If this Grim was just an ordinary magus, they naturally wouldn't make such a big fuss over him. However, if he really had the strength of a super powerful being, then the Scattered Towers without a leader would definitely be a paradise for him. I've been in charge of the Magus Association for more than 1,000 years, and I've seen countless geniuses and geniuses. However, even after 1,000 years, the 3 major Magus organizations are still the 3 major Magus organizations, and there has never been a 4th faction. Why? Seeing the doubt in everyone's eyes, Domner could not help but chuckle softly. That's because their foundations are too shallow. A single rank 4 super powerful being wants to support the entire central continent? We'll talk about this after he becomes a rank 8 Magus. Chapter 1246. In a special secret room, Grim finally sat down calmly and began to negotiate with Wizard Domner. Lord Grim, did you come to the east just for the divine, godly stone of Luminous? As the host, Domner was naturally the first to speak. Although Domner was the only one in the room, Grim could clearly sense that he was being watched by at least 20 mysterious conscience. It could be said that apart from some elders who had important matters to attend to or were trapped in other planes, the rest of the Grade 4 Magi were all paying attention to this negotiation in various ways. After coming to this place, I've deeply felt the power and momentum of the Magus Union's development. The knowledge here, the waymarks from other planes, the slaves from other planes, and the high-grade resources are all things I'm interested in. But before we talk about them, I want to settle the matter of the divine, godly stone of Luminous. Although Grim was alone, he did not lose to his opponent in terms of aura. Currently, the Union only has one divine, godly stone of Luminous. What price are you willing to pay for it? I seem to recall that the divine, godly stone of Luminous is in Olivier's hands. You don't have to worry about that, sir. The divine, godly stone of Luminous was originally given to Olivier as a reward for the mission. If you agree to our conditions, I will naturally have a way to get her to hand it over. Domner narrowed his eyes with a cunning look on his face. Grim muttered to himself for a moment before finally speaking. Lord Domner should know that I have some special mushrooms from another plane that can increase the aptitude of a magus to a certain extent. They are effective even for Grade 4 Magi. If you are willing to give me the divine, godly stone of Luminous, I can give you 3 portions of these special mushrooms in exchange. It's just some resources that can increase the aptitude of a magus. It's not worth our attention. That Wizard Domner could not help but speak proudly. Our Magus Union has been around for tens of thousands of years, and we have many resources like this. Not only do we have resources that can increase the aptitude of a magus, but we also have resources that can increase one's aptitude and potential. Grim furrowed his brows and could not help but feel nervous. If it had been someone else, Grim would have thought that they were bluffing in order to bargain with him. But facing this old man who had lived for more than 1,000 years, Grim sincerely believed that everything he said was the truth. With the size of the Sorcerer Association and the accumulation of tens of thousands of years of resources, if the association didn't even have such a foundation, wouldn't it be a joke? However, these items were considered strategic resources. Unless they were at their wits' end, the 3 major sorcerer organizations would not easily let them fall into the hands of their competitors. On the other hand, Grim and his Crimson family were too poor. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken out such resources to trade with outsiders. Then what does Sir want? Grim asked in a deep voice. Twirling his sparse beard, Domnall said leisurely, I want you. You want me? Yes, as long as you are willing to join our Magus Association, I can make the decision to give you this divine or of luminous flame as a gift." Grim narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Sir, you should know that I'm also an elder of the Scattered Tower Forest Association. The elder of the Scattered Talon Association." Domner repeated Grim's answer and almost laughed himself into convulsions. "Your Excellency, you want to insist on this point, but I wonder if Freed is willing or not." Saying this, he began to laugh maniacally. Hearing the arrogant laughter, Grim's expression first turned sullen, then a trace of awkwardness. Finally, he sighed with a gloomy expression and did not say a word. One could not blame the other party for his sarcasm. Grim's position in the Scattered Tower Forest in the Central Continent was indeed a little awkward. For the past 80 years, he had not come out. On one hand, he wanted to slowly recover from the damage to his soul. On the other hand, he was worried that he would continue to provoke the frightened magi of the Central Continent. If not for the fact that he wanted to form an alliance with the Flame Tyrant and obtain the method to refine the Law of Fire, he would not have come out of his seclusion and reappeared in the eyes of the public. This time, the only thing he could rely on was the divine fire pearl that he had begun to gain control of. It was thanks to this level 5 source magic artifact that Grim was able to suppress Olivier, causing Olivier to feel indignant, but unable to do anything about it. "Since both of us are willing to talk openly, there's no need for you to lie to me, sir. Your position in the Central Continent is very awkward, and you can say that you are in a dilemma. If you really want to unify the Scattered Tower Forest, let alone our 3 major organizations, I'm afraid that the internal backlash will be very fierce. Are you really confident that you can suppress the combined efforts of those 10 magi? Even if you endure for a few more years, and your family's power grows a bit stronger, when you truly have the power to unify the Central Continent, do you think our 3 major organizations will still sit by and watch you do this?" Grim fell into an indescribable silence. "I've heard that your family already has 4 powerful experts. You, Mary, Alice, and a powerful thunder dragon from another world. This kind of power cannot be underestimated in the future. However, compared to our Magus Association, it's not even worth mentioning. Rather than being hindered by those mediocre people, you might as well come to our Magus Association. At least here, we have a wider world for you to use. Moreover, our Magus Association's knowledge and resources are far superior to those of the other 2 major organizations. Compared to the Scattered Tower Forest, we are like the heavens and the earth. If you still want to advance to rank 5, coming to our Magus Association is undoubtedly the wisest choice." Although this Vice Chairman Domner's battle prowess was unknown, his eloquence and insight were top-notch. Even with Grim's staunch temperament, he was shaken by his words, and even his mind began to waver. However, at this moment, the ship's cold voice sounded in Grim's mind. Detected the existence of a strange spiritual force field. Estimated effect is spiritual contamination, able to make the target believe the caster's words more easily. Please be on your guard. Damn, it's actually a spiritual force field. No wonder I was convinced by him to the point where my heart palpitated. Grim cursed angrily as he roused the Law of Fire to guard his mind. Apart from a strange flame rune that suddenly lit up in the depths of his black pupils, there were no other changes to his appearance. Domner, who had been watching Grim closely, felt that he had led Grim's mind into the path he had set for himself. Just as he was about to strike while the iron was hot, the strange flame rune suddenly burned a large hole in his dense web of spiritual force. Domner's heart skipped a beat, and he instantly lost control of Grim's mind. "Lord Domner, thank you for your concern." Grim's eyes were burning as he laughed coldly. "I'm currently living very well in the central part of the continent and have no plans to move to the east. Let's talk about the specifics of the deal." Asterisk cough. Asterisk seeing that Grim's mind had broken free from the control of his spiritual force. Domner could only sigh regretfully, a smile appearing on his face once again. "Since you have no intention of coming to our Magus Association, we won't force you. Then this deal can only be carried out according to the rules. 10 million magic crystals as well as the special mushroom seeds and all the cultivation techniques. As soon as Domner finished speaking, the mental network behind him rang with the loud protest of Olivier, who had tortured and killed Witch Olivier. Olivier, this matter concerns the interests of all the elders in the association, so you can't cause trouble here. Isn't what you want the most for your brother to live for a few more years? Fine, I can make the decision to send a punitive army to attack the Elven Kingdom and seize the Tree of Life from them. I believe that with the Tree of Life as a sacrifice, your brother will have no problem living for another 100 years. What do you think? You have nothing to say now. The Tree of Life of a mid-level Elven Kingdom was naturally inferior to a rank 5 divine item egg. But Olivier also knew that this was the biggest concession the old man could make, and he had no choice but to agree to this condition. Olivier gritted his teeth and said sternly, "I will personally lead that team. My brother doesn't have many more years left, and we cannot allow them to slowly invade us." Deal. Just a few casual words from two top-notch magi could set off a bloodbath in some other world. And the motive behind all this was just to let the family of a rank 4 magus live for a few more years. Grimm had no idea what Domner was doing behind the scenes. He frowned and pondered deeply about the other party's conditions. 10 million magic crystals. Hand over all the special mushrooms. These two conditions piled on top of each other was an unbearable pressure for the Crimson family. Even Grimm had to think carefully before making a decision that could affect the future of the Crimson family. He had to think carefully about the consequences before making such a decision. Finally, after a quarter of an hour, Grimm took off a strangely shaped ring from the ring finger of his right hand and said solemnly, "This is the Sodden Sacred Ring, a rank 4 treasure I obtained from a paladin plane. It can purify one's own energy into non-elemental holy light energy. I can use it to exchange for some magic crystals. Is that okay?" After saying that, Grimm inserted the flame energy into the Sodden Sacred Ring and immediately formed a shield of holy light and holy light arrows in front of him. For no reason, Domner's eyebrows twitched. The low roar of Wizard Jaredin rang in his mind. "I want this ring. Old man, help me get it." Chapter 1247. After reaching Tier 4, obtaining some high-tiered equipment wouldn't be too difficult. Those who were strong enough could go to other planes and fight a few battles. Those who did not like to fight could stay in the backlands for a few years. And with a large amount of magic crystals and resources, they could also create decent equipment. However, this only applied to equipment of the same rank. For most people, it was only a dream to create a unique original magic tool that was compatible with one's own original soul. Most of the things that they stole were useless, and those who hid in the backlands did not have the right to be picky. Therefore, there were very few suitable equipment in the hands of Grade 4 wizard. Take Grimm, for example. After advancing to Grade 4, he had snatched a bunch of Grade 4 equipment, such as the Dripping Blood Spear, Ogre Warhammer, Sodden's Divine Ring, Breath of Darkness, Ring of Shadows. However, the only one that was compatible with his fire element was the Flaming Coral Staff. If he did not snatch the Shadow Pearl and exchange it for the Vulcan Orb, Grimm's battle strength would not have increased so much, and he would not have been able to suppress and kill a powerful being like the Witch. Therefore, when he suddenly saw a Grade 4 Holy Light Ring that was compatible with his own attribute, even Wizard Jaredin could not help but be overjoyed. He could not even wait to get a hold of it. The main reason why Grimm was willing to exchange Sodden's Divine Ring was because he could not unleash the full potential of a Grade 4 item in his hands. Most of the time, Grimm had to rely on his powerful spiritual force to forcibly activate it. Instead of keeping this useless item in his hands as an inefficient healing ring, he might as well take this opportunity to trade it and use it as a Grade 4 item. As for whether or not it would benefit his enemies, that was not a problem. The Sorcerers' Association was still too far away from the Scattered Tower Forest. In the next few hundred years, Grimm's main enemies would be the stubborn Tier 4 sorcerers in the Central Continent who wanted to maintain their glorious lives. Grimm would not easily become enemies with the three major wizard organizations before he had the confidence to do so. Even if the other party was full of hostility towards him, Grimm could not care less about some schemes and plots before he could officially invade. As long as the three major wizard organizations did not dare to start a real war, Grimm was confident that he could have the last laugh in this race of time and strength. Domner, who was sitting opposite Grimm, took the Sodden's divine ring and tried to play with it for a while, verifying the strength attribute inside. Only then did his old face relax, and he frowned. The basic price of a grade 4 item in the market is around 2 to 3 million. Although this holy light ring is good, its attributes are too rare. I'm afraid that it will affect its basic value when traded. But since you're willing to trade it, I will not lower the price too much. How about 3 million? Grimm smiled. I remember that Wizard Jaredin was one of the people you introduced to me. I think, if I were to contact him, his offer would definitely be much higher than yours. Domner's expression did not change, and he still looked indifferent. Domner, Grimm God. The market for high-grade items had always been like this. In the hands of those who needed it, it might be a priceless treasure, but in the hands of others, it was just a high-grade item. A moment later, the secret room shone brightly, and a strange figure of light condensed out of thin air. After his body was completely energized, this wizard Jaredin had the strange ability to disassemble and reconstruct his body at will. After the body was completely energized, this wizard Jaredin also had the strange ability to disassemble and reshape the body at will. As long as there was light, it would not be able to stop his power from penetrating. This power was already close to those pure elemental creatures. This kind of power was already somewhat close to those pure elemental creatures. I want this ring. This light elemental envoy Jaredin was quite straightforward, but the ball was in Grimm's court. As for the price, you can name it. As long as I can afford it, I will not bargain. Everyone present was a well-known grade 4 wizard. If Grimm asked for an exorbitant price, they would only mock and look down on him, which would not be beneficial to the negotiation. But if he said the price was too low, Grimm could not even get past himself, let alone the others. Grimm squinted his eyes and stared at this wizard Jaredin, who looked straightforward but was actually extremely cunning. After thinking for a long time, he slowly opened his mouth. 5 million magic crystals and a drop of blood, sir. Jaredin was currently in the form of a figure of light. His entire body was emitting a blinding, terrifying light, so his expression could not be understood. However, from the light elemental waves he was emitting, he did not seem to be angered by Grimm's rude request. You want to study the light element? After a long time, Jaredin suddenly spoke. That's right. Among all the elemental particles, the light element has extraordinary purification properties and a special method of transmission. In terms of speed alone, the light element is definitely among the top 3 in the plane. Therefore, I want to study the light element, sir, and improve my clumsy and slow movement speed after I transform into a fire giant. Grimm was still smiling. Jaredin did not comment on Grimm's words. Perhaps it was true, perhaps it was false. Whether it was true or not, only Jaredin himself could judge. There were too many ways to use the opponent's flesh and hair to cast curses. Taking the initiative to ask for a drop of blood was already a big offense. However, with Grimm's status, if he publicly cast a curse on an elder of the Wizard Association, it would be no less than declaring war on the Wizard Association. Therefore, whether or not Grimm would be so unwise was something only Jaredin could judge for himself. Were there any idiots among the rank 4 wizards? There might be a lot of lunatics, but not a single idiot. Would a rank 4 wizard with a large family in the Central Continent risk war with a Wizard Association to cast a curse on Jaredin, who had no grudges against him? Seeing that Jaredin was full of doubts, Grimm could only lower his standards. Since Sir Jaredin has doubts, I won't take the blood away. I'll just stay here and feel the law of light. That should be fine, right? Hearing this, Jaredin was overjoyed and finally nodded. That's great. Saying this, he drew a line on his chest with the tip of his right hand, and a drop of milky white blood floated out and slowly flew towards Grim. Perhaps Jaredin felt that this was too unfair to Grim, but he did not take out any ordinary blood. Instead, he took out the origin blood from the depths of the core. This thing was extremely important to him, and he could not let it fall into the hands of others. However, Jaredin had already promised that he would not take it away, and would only let him feel it from a close distance. Moreover, Jaredin did not believe that Jaredin could analyze the law of light that he had spent hundreds of years to grasp in such a short time with just his mental perception. Looking at the origin blood floating in front of him, Grim did not use a spatial wizard tool to carry it. Instead, he drew lines with one hand, condensing flame runes one after another and fusing them into the blood. Slowly, he felt and comprehended the unique energy within. Blue light flashed in the depths of his squinted eyes, shooting out rays of different types. He repeatedly examined and determined the elemental composition and energy composition within. Beep. Strange light elemental aggregation detected. Scanning in depth. In Grim's mind, a three-dimensional image of this drop of origin blood was projected. With the gathering of various data, the image became clearer and clearer. Even the frequency of the energy waves it emitted was the same as the simulation. Beep. pH has been determined. Beep. Cell activity has been determined. Beep. Blood composition is 21%, 46% similar to humans. No bacteria or biological fragments detected. Beep. Light elemental energy has replaced biological energy and is tightly integrated with the cell tissue. Currently in the process of energy structure deconstruction. Warning, this operation will cause irreversible energy disintegration of the detected target. Does the host wish to continue this operation? This operation will be paused for now. Continue after all additional tests. Beep. Sequence of commands has been adjusted. Composition analysis continuing. With a series of prompts from the AI chip, Grim's examination of the origin blood began to progress to a deeper level. While Grim focused all of his attention on the origin blood, Domner and Jaredin in the secret room could not help but exchange glances, their expressions turning solemn. While Grim was examining the origin blood, the group of magi from the association were also observing him. However, Grim was different from other magi. He did not use any alchemy equipment, nor did he use any magic wands of divination. It seemed like he was really using his naked eye and a flame detection spell to carry out some complicated operation. This method of research was unprecedented. Could it be that Grim's naked eye was even more accurate than the magnifying glass on the alchemy table? Could it be that Grim's spiritual perception could surpass the limits of the limit and see the life force? Could it be that he could see the composition of the origin of energy without the help of a spectrometer? There were too many inconceivable things, and the two present began to feel suspicious. Could it be that Grim was just putting on an act and did not actually see anything? Not to mention them, even the magi from the association who were watching from behind the scenes could not hold it in any longer. Just as the two were dealing with the bombardment of the elders in their minds, a strange red ray shot out from Grim's eyes, striking the slowly rotating origin blood. The two different types of energy collided, immediately causing a strong energy reaction. Chapter 1248. Disappeared, the origin blood disappeared just like that. Not to mention Domner. Even Jaredin himself was dumbfounded. He closed his eyes and sensed for a moment. The drop of origin blood had indeed dissipated completely, and not even a trace of its aura was left. There could not be any hidden dangers like this. Could it be that Grim had made a mistake? With all sorts of strange thoughts in mind, Jaredin, who had been extremely vigilant, suddenly felt a little guilty. The ring the other party had given him was a bona fide Tier 4 sacred ring. Moreover, it was completely compatible with his strength attribute. However, he had only given Grim a drop of origin blood, and he was not allowed to take it out of the room. He had thought that it was only right and proper, but now that he thought about it, it was a little too harsh. Sheridan hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. Did you not control it well enough? How about I give you another drop of origin blood? Grimm slowly inhaled deeply, easing the pain in his brain that had been caused by the crazy operation. He laughed wryly. With different strength attributes, it's impossible to comprehend a second type of law. Forget it. It seems like this was just my wishful thinking. Even if you give me more origin blood, it'll be very difficult for me to comprehend anything from it. Seeing Grimm's vexed expression, Domner chuckled and interrupted. Grasping another type of law is of course a great thing, but you have to act within your own capabilities. If you don't have the corresponding elemental aptitude, it'll be very difficult for you to comprehend the true law of light, even if you swallow Sheridan whole. If not, the Magus world would have long since fallen into a state of frenzied slaughter. I was too rash. Grimm rubbed his forehead, looking dejected. However, in the depths of his heart, Grimm was practically bursting with joy. In his mind, the AI chip's projection of the drop of origin blood was so vivid that it was almost tangible. It was sparkling and translucent, and its energy aura was almost identical to the one that had been destroyed. The AI chip even projected dense data and abnormally complex energy structure diagrams at the edge of the projection. However, what made Grimm smile was not this, but the last few words at the end of the projection. Replicable, 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 replicable. The voice kept echoing in Grimm's mind, causing his entire head to buzz. After the AI chip had analyzed the origin blood, it had become replicable. What did this mean for Grimm? To be honest, even he himself did not know. However, this did not stop him from feeling that he had found a treasure. If this origin blood could be replicated on a large scale, then what would it become once it was gathered? A man of light made of pure energy, or a brand new light elemental life form? Would the origin blood of a tear for a life form be useful to marry? For a moment, Grimm could not help but let his imagination run wild, and he even began to have all kinds of delusions. Your Excellency Grimm, Your Excellency Grimm, you haven't confirmed our deal yet, have you? Domner could not help but call out. Grimm shook his head and drove away the unrealistic thoughts in his mind. He then forced himself to focus and face the old fox in front of him seriously. 1,000 years of vicissitudes had tempered Domner's mind to the point that it was as firm as a rock. As the clone of a great wizard, his knowledge was even richer than all the elders of the association combined. The old are cunning and the old are slippery. Making a deal with such an opponent, it would be strange if they didn't get eaten up by him. Hence, Grimm could only force himself to focus and meticulously bargain with the head of the Magus Association. Lord Domner, it's impossible for you to take away the cultivation and cultivation techniques of the mutated mushrooms. This is a top-grade resource that I obtained after risking my life in another world, and I'm counting on it to accumulate some capital for my family. Hence, it's impossible for me to trade it away. We only sell the finished product and not the seeds or techniques. Your Excellency Grimm, your words are too absolute. Although your mutated mushrooms are good, they're only a consumable type of grade 4 Magus resource. The divine stone of luminous flame that you want is one of the best grade 4 items in terms of quality and quality. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a grade 5 item. No matter how much you praise it, it's still a grade 4 item. Are you going to price it as a grade 5 item? Besides, although the divine stone of luminous flame is rare, it's not impossible to find it. If I'm willing to spend some time in the Outlands for a few decades, I believe I'll be able to find it. Then I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. A dual attribute treasure, like the divine stone of luminous flame, is a rare resource even in the Outlands. Even if it appears occasionally, it'll quickly fall into the hands of those great magi. For a grade 4 Magus like you to compete with those great magi? Don't you think your thoughts are a little childish and laughable? No matter what you say, my Excellency, I won't trade the seeds and techniques. However, as long as my Excellency agrees, I can prioritize supplying these mutated mushrooms to your organization. 3 people a year for 10 years. How about it? We still hope to have such resources in our hands. You're not willing to sell the seeds and techniques because you're worried that we'll monopolize the market. How about this? As long as you complete the trade, I guarantee that all the mutated mushrooms will only be circulated within the association and not sold outside. How about this? You should have nothing to say about this, right? Damn, this works? Grimm was tongue-tied by the other party's words, unable to retort. Cough. There was nothing he could do about it. The one who spoke first would always be at a disadvantage. Since the other party was determined to obtain the divine stone of luminous flame, he had the upper hand in this trade. Apart from passively accepting the blows, there was nothing he could do. In truth, if the other party had insisted on the previous conditions, Grimm would have been helpless and could only grit his teeth and accept it. Now that the other party had made such a concession, Grimm could only stop while he was ahead. He slapped Domner's palm to confirm a trade. After the slap, Domner grabbed at the air, and a strange stone burning with milky white flames suddenly appeared and slowly floated towards Grimm. Grimm raised his head and looked at the strange stone that was only the size of a fist, many emotions welling up in his heart. Not so long ago, when he saw the mountain of mana crystals in the Tower of Fate, Grimm had been so excited that he could not help but want to lie on it for the rest of his life. But now, with just a touch of his upper lip, a huge mountain of mana crystals had been given away as a gift. The situation and the changes in the world were simply inconceivable, and even more so made one sigh in admiration. Although the divine stone in front of him was not large, it was so heavy that Grimm felt an unusual pressure. Since the other party had handed over the divine stone in advance, it meant that they were not afraid of Grimm going back on his word, trying to go back on the Magus Association's debt. Such a person had not been born in the Magus world yet. Grimm did not reach out to receive the divine stone. Instead, he took out the dripping blood spear and the ogre war hammer from his storage ring. The 2 heavy weapons landed on the ground, causing the ground protected by the spell formation to rumble. Since I'm here, I don't plan on taking these 2 pieces of trash back. My lord, just give me a price and convert them into mana crystals. Domner's eyes were so sharp that he was able to identify the attributes and peculiarities of the 2 weapons with just a glance. He smiled and said, "The forging level of this spear is too crude. Only the additional nomological attribute is worth looking at. As for this pair of warhammers, just as you said, they're a pair of pieces of trash. Apart from having some value extracted from the strange metals inside, they're not worth much by themselves." At this point, Domner raised his head and swept a glance at Grimm. "But since you've taken them out, I'll take them at the price of a grade 4 item. The warhammers are worth 1,500,000 mana crystals, and the spear is worth 2,300,000, for a total of 3,800,000 mana crystals. How about it?" Grimm was satisfied with the price, and hurriedly nodded in agreement. Seeing that Domnall had put away the 2 weapons, Grimm carefully placed the divine stone into his elder's ring of authority. "My lord, you sold that ring for 5 million mana crystals, and these 2 weapons for 3,800,000 mana crystals. You only need to take out another 1,200,000 mana crystals, as well as the seeds and cultivation methods, and our transaction will be complete. Your Magus Association should have a contact in the Central Continent, right? Send him to the Crimson family's encampment in the Alobes region. I'll immediately contact the family and have them hand these things over to you. In the meantime, I'll be disturbing you here." Domner was obviously very satisfied with Grimm's tactfulness. "Since it's rare for you to visit the association, why don't you take a look around the Overwatch Tower for the next few days? Our library, alchemy laboratory, and other facilities are the best in the entire Magus world. It'll definitely make your trip worthwhile, my lord. Also, a few of the association's elders seem to want to talk to you alone. Looks like you'll be busy in the coming days, my lord." Hearing the old Magus's sarcastic words, Grimm could only nod doubtfully and leave the secret room. After Grimm left, the old Magus Domner's smile disappeared, and he could not help but twirl his beard as he pondered. After a while, he suddenly asked, "Tell me, what do you think of this, Grim?" A deep, hoarse voice suddenly sounded in the empty secret room. Chapter 1249. Inside the secret chamber. A strange humanoid figure suddenly rose from the empty floor. As the yellow mist that covered the figure dissipated, a strange fellow who was even older than Domner appeared. His face was so wrinkled that it was almost impossible to see his original appearance. His body was hunched, and he was leaning on a yellow staff that was a head taller than him. His hair was unkempt, and his eyes were completely white with no pupils at all. He was wearing an old robe that had not been washed for many years. The wrinkles, stains, and grease had covered the robe's original color, making it impossible to tell the material of the robe at a glance. At first glance, he looked like a pitiful, wandering sorcerer who couldn't be any more down and out. There was no way he could step foot into the elegant hall, let alone appear in the overlooked tower, which represented the highest achievement of the Sorcerer Association. Unfortunately, not only did he appear here, but he also accepted Domner's greeting without batting an eyelid. "Mustana, you're already the highest-ranked prophet in our association. Why? Even you can't see Grimm's future." "Domner, I've already said that someone has taken the initiative to cover this young man's future. Doesn't that mean you can't see it?" Domner could not help but frown. "Mustana, the association has not mistreated you all these years. The annual budget allocated to prophets like you is the highest among all the branches. We've even given you the top floor of the overlooked tower. Are you going to dismiss me with just that? I can feel that there's a powerful force of destiny rising in the north. She has been paying attention to this young fire sorcerer. If we prophets intervene, I'm afraid we'll provoke an invisible war of destiny." "War?" Domner laughed coldly. "Since when did we sorcerers start a fear war? Didn't we raise you for so long in the hope that you'll come in handy at critical times? Why? Are you going to reject my order?" "Domner, we've been very happy for the past hundreds of years. What's wrong with you today?" Mustana raised his head and stared at his old friend with his milky white, turbid eyes. He hissed, "What does this young man have on him that you're willing to go to war with him?" "Danger. I sense danger from him." Domnall thought hard and said, "It's just that I haven't been able to find the source of the danger. That's why I want to find out the reason with your help." "Understood. Then I will try my best. I'll go back now. With the power of the tower, I might be able to see more things." As soon as he finished speaking, Mustana tapped his staff on the ground, and his entire body disappeared in a cloud of pale yellow smoke. When Mustana's aura completely disappeared, Domner could not help but mutter to himself, "The Central Region. That's the most resource-rich and densely populated region in the entire Magus continent. If the Wizard Association can't get it, we won't allow other forces to interfere, let alone allow it to grow. Grim, you better not have the ambition to unify the Central Continent, or else." Gazing at the tall tower, the 777th floor. Looking down from there, layers of soft, white clouds floated halfway up the tower, blocking most of the visual space. Occasionally, through the gaps between the layers of clouds, one could see the deep and vivid colors of the land. In the vast witchcraft palace, Mustana's hunched and small figure appeared as a cloud of yellow smoke dispersed. As soon as he appeared, he held onto his wooden staff and walked towards the back of the hall. The hollow sound of the wooden staff hitting the floor reverberated in the empty sorcerer hall for a long time. As the only level 4 prophet in the association, Mustana had an extremely high status. Although every level 4 sorcerer could occupy a floor, he was the only one who could occupy the top floor of the overlooked tower like Mustana. This was an honor, but also a burden. Whenever the association reached a critical juncture, a chief prophet like him would become the beacon that would clear up the fog and point out the direction for all the wizards. However, only Mustana, who had learned the spell of destiny, knew how much power was needed to help the Sorcerer Association correct the course of such a huge ship and keep it sailing in the sunny sea. Although the Sorcerer Association had been stable and peaceful for thousands of years under Domner's rule, it had also experienced several terrifying disasters that no one knew about. It was because of the Chief Prophet's foresight and the great power of the Sorcerers Association that the Sorcerer Association was able to pull the Sorcerer Association out of one terrifying whirlpool after another. The position of Chief Prophet was not easy to hold, at least before Mustana. According to what he knew, 3 Chief Prophets had died due to the terrifying backlash of destiny. The position of Chief Prophet was not fixed. Whoever could become the only level 4 prophet in the association would be able to sit firmly in this position, give orders, and enjoy the best resources. However, these resources were not easy to enjoy. Most of the time, they would have to pay with their lives. At any time, there could only be one level 4 prophet in the association. Only when this prophet died, due to the backlash of destiny, would the association pick out the most powerful level 3 prophet with the best performance and nurture him into a level 4 prophet. Before the new prophet died, the other prophets were only a backup and a form of insurance. Therefore, there was no kinship between the prophets and the association. Instead, it was a blatant competition. Those at the bottom could not wait to climb up, while those at the top would tremble in fear, afraid that one day they would become the stepping stones for the association to change their fate. He might be able to control the fate of thousands of sorcerers, but he could not control his own fate. From this aspect, Mustana was actually quite envious of his colleague in the north who could summon the wind and summon the rain. Perhaps that was what a messenger of destiny should be like. He, on the other hand, was just a pitiful servant crawling in front of destiny. Mustana was the only one on the 777th floor of the Overlook Tower. This was the rule he had set, and it was also the only pride he had left. At least before he died, he would not allow anyone to step into his territory. As the chief prophet of the association, Mustana naturally had the highest authority in the Overlook Tower. His control over the tower spirit Raphatus was second only to that of Domner. This also allowed him to mobilize the energy reserves of the tower at will, maximizing the amount of wizard energy needed to replace the destiny energy consumed in the ritual of destiny. Overlook Tower. Overlook Tower. The reason why the tower had such a name was because it was the tallest wizard tower in the entire sorcerer world. Standing at the top of the tower, as long as one's vision was good enough, one could even see the strange, deep blue color at the end of the horizon. That was the color of the endless ocean. After passing through a series of empty and lonely corridors, Mustana arrived in front of a spiral metal escalator. He climbed up the escalator and finally arrived at the astrological platform. The layout of the astrology platform was very simple. It was a narrow space placed under the dome of the tower. Above the astrological platform was the spire of the overlooking tower. A 10-meter-long metal spike stood tall, and it was overflowing with a frightening witchcraft energy. The 4 walls of the astrology platform were hollowed out. The chilly wind blew in from all directions, passing through the patterns on the metal walls and letting out shrill cries that sounded like the cries of ghosts. In the middle of the narrow space, there was a round stone pillar more than a meter tall. At the top of the stone pillar was a strange crystal the size of a human head. At this moment, the inside of the crystal was filled with rolling clouds and hazy fog. It was a scene of complete chaos and confusion. Mustana walked up the escalator and into the narrow space. As soon as he stepped in, he pulled his wizard robe tight. However, it could not block the chilly wind from entering every corner of his robe, sweeping away the last bit of warmth on his body. This was the place of destiny, and it rejected any other power other than the destiny energy. Therefore, Mustana did not cast any warm or protective spells on himself. The wizard robe he was wearing was made of the most ordinary cloth, without any special effects. If it was not for his decent physique as a Tier 4 sorcerer, he would probably freeze to death in a short period of time. 11 physique was undoubtedly too low for the other Tier 4 sorcerers. However, it was enough for Mustana. Due to their profession, their life force was always in a state of severe depletion. No matter how well they nurtured their bodies and how high their physique was, After a large-scale destiny ceremony, their life force would be almost depleted. There was a price to pay in order to peek into destiny. The prophets of the association did not have a high affinity with destiny, like the witches of destiny. If they wanted to peek into the direction of destiny, they had to sacrifice their lives. The most severe depletion was the upper limit of their physique. The moment Mustana's physique reached 0 would be the moment of his death. Before that, he still had 11 points of physique, which was enough for him to do many things. Mustana walked in front of the stone pillar shakily. He placed his right hand on the crystal and slowly rubbed it. The huge tower's energy spread along the body of the tower, lighting up all the patterns and runes on the walls of the astrology platform. Even the stone pillar was illuminated inch by inch. Finally, when the sorcery energy flowed into the strange crystal, the entire spire of the overlooked tower became blindingly bright. The wind had strangely stopped. Chapter 1250. Mustana, who was calm just a moment ago, pounced on the crystal ball like a naughty child who had just gotten a new toy. His eyes were filled with thirst as he looked at the scene inside the crystal ball. He could not help but mumble, "Mine, mine, it's all mine. This is my world. All of you will never have any secrets in front of me. What should I do first? Oh yeah, I haven't seen my baby Anna for 7 days. Let's take a look at her first." As Mustana mumbled to himself in an almost insane manner, the scene in the crystal ball kept changing. Soon, it was fixed on a room that was filled with mist. In a huge, luxurious bath, a beautiful woman with a graceful figure was lying in it. She was gently splashing hot water on her body. The mist lingered around her, and it was a beautiful sight to behold. Beside her, there were a few young maids in light gauze. One of them was massaging her shoulders, one was applying balsam juice on her nails, and one was peeling grapes and feeding them to her carefully. The entire bathroom was filled with the scent of spring. Haha, Beauty Anna, you finally can't wait to take a bath after holding it in for so long. Wow, this figure, this skin, this waist. You're the most feminine out of all the level for witches. Just as Mustana was peeping at the graceful witch from the top of the overlooked tower, Anna, who was bathing and having fun in the secret chamber, suddenly raised her head. The relaxed smile on her face suddenly turned into a sinister and vicious expression. She raised her hand abruptly, and thousands of sharp water arrows splashed out from the pool. In an instant, the magic eye that had suddenly appeared in the air was shattered into pieces. "Damn you, Mustana, you bastard! If you dare to peep at me again, I'll dig your eyes out and stomp on them like a ball." Looking at the top of the overlooked tower, the scene in the crystal ball suddenly shook. A water arrow shot out from the crystal ball and instantly turned into a pool of hot water, drenching Mustana like a drowned rat. Mustana was not angry at being humiliated and played with by his enemy. Instead, he raised his arm and sniffed the fragrance in the water vapor. An extremely twisted and obscene smile appeared on his face. Even a beauty's bath is so fragrant. "Anna, you will be mine sooner or later. I will definitely get all your secrets. Hee. Next time, I'll peep at you while you're going to the toilet and take a picture to force you to submit. Hee. That's right. Counting the days, it should be bedtime for that girl from the Silver Alliance. I'll take the opportunity to take a look." After saying that, Mustana once again pounced in front of the crystal ball and began to frantically search for the special mark that he had left in the River of Fate. The scenes in the crystal ball kept changing. It could be a tightly guarded secret chamber for witchcraft or a huge ship that was bobbing up and down. The sorcerers in the crystal ball were either meditating, transcribing books, or concentrating on their witchcraft experiments. They were of different characters and locations, and their movements were relaxed and casual. It was obvious that they were unaware of Mustana's spying. Finally, following the guidance of a red ray, the scene in the crystal ball suddenly paused, revealing the residence of a magus that was filled with the aura of a female. In the middle of the crystal ball, a beautiful witch with a top-notch figure and appearance was undressing. She seemed to be preparing to go to bed to rest. "Helena, I've peeped at so many witches in the past, but when it comes to the shape of the buttocks, you're still the prettiest." Mustana's entire body was almost lying on the crystal ball. He stuck out his long, scarlet tongue and licked the beautiful female buttocks that were magnified several times through the screen. "Little darling, I'll definitely get my hands on you in the future." It seemed that Mustana's obscenity was too piercing. In the scene, the beautiful, which had taken off half of her robes and had just walked to the bedside, suddenly turned her head and looked around the residence in bewilderment. It was a pity that she was only a grade 2 witch. It was obvious that she could not discover Mustana's eye of magic as quickly as the grade 4 witch Anna could. The young witch hurriedly took out a talisman from her undergarments and held it tightly in her hand as she called out a strange and hard-to-pronounce name. A moment later, light and shadow flickered in the residence, and an old woman suddenly emerged from the void and stood beside the young witch. "Lady Beatrice, that feeling is coming again. I'm so scared." Seeing the old woman, the young witch rushed to her and hugged her arm tightly. It's Mustana's stench again." "Mustana, you've crossed the line. This is the territory of the Silver Alliance. If you dare to peep at my disciple again, I'll definitely go to the Overlook Tower and expose your evil deeds to the public. Bastard, get out of here." Following the old woman's angry roar, an invisible energy barrier enveloped the entire residence and blocked the prophecy crystal's long-distance peeping. From the Overlook Tower in the middle of the continent to the Sky Castle of the Silver Alliance, the shortest distance between the two places was 200,000 to 300,000 miles. However, Mustana was able to use the terrifying power of the prophecy crystal to project his power over in an instant. This also perfectly displayed the terrifying power of a high-ranking prophet. For high-ranking prophets, other than a few places that were protected by the power of destiny, the rest of the world was almost transparent to them. Although they did not have the ability to kill people from afar or cast a curse from tens of thousands of miles away, these days and nights of spying and probing were enough to drive the mentally unstable wizards crazy. This was especially so for those young witches who were not very attractive. Whenever they thought about how a perverted old magus was secretly observing them from all angles, whether they were eating, sleeping, bathing, go to the toilet, or having sex, none of them would be able to endure such a horrifying scene. Mustana did not feel the slightest bit of shame when which Beatrice interrupted his peeping. Instead, he viciously shouted into the distance, "Beatrice, you old beggar! Aren't you so dissatisfied because I didn't peep at you because you're too ugly? Next time I'll pick a time when you're having sex with your male pet and sneak in to take a picture of you. Let's see if you still have the face to trouble me then." After cursing like a rough farmer for a long time, Mustana finally remembered his main mission today. "Damn it, I can't fool around anymore. The energy of the Overlook Tower has been greatly depleted. If I don't show some results, that Domner will definitely give me a hard time." Mustana could not help but shudder at the thought of the legendary fire wizard's ruthless methods. He hurriedly rushed to the crystal ball and began to search for the legendary fire wizard. The legendary fire wizard was in the Overlook Tower. Even if his residence was protected by layers of spell formations, it would not be able to withstand Mustana's spiritual force tentacles that had secretly reached in through the River of Destiny. As Mustana fiddled with the crystal ball, the scene inside the crystal ball jumped and flashed through the secret rooms and residences. Finally, in a tightly guarded secret room, Mustana saw the figure of the young fire wizard. It was a luxuriously decorated secret room. The young fire wizard was sitting in front of a wooden table with a magic mirror floating in front of him. He seemed to be communicating with someone in the distance. "Hee kid, I've caught you. Now, let me see what you're doing." Mustana sneered as he fiddled with the crystal ball with both hands. He slowly pushed the eye of magic to zoom in and see who the young fire wizard was communicating with and what he was talking about. However, it was strange. Before the eye of magic could get close to the young fire wizard, the scene inside the crystal ball shook. Suddenly, a large red cloud spread out and covered everything. Immediately after, the crystal of prophecy lost direct contact with the eye of magic in the distance. "Bastard, what's going on? Did the fire wizard set up some sort of protective spell formation?" Mustana roared angrily. Impossible. My eye of magic is imbued with the power of destiny and can penetrate most known protective spell formations. This bastard. What method did he use to destroy my eye of magic? This won't do. Let me try again. Mustana had never seen such a strange thing before. He fiddled with the crystal of prophecy angrily again and condensed another eye of magic. He then sent it through the river of destiny into the residence of the legendary fire wizard. The scene appeared again. The legendary fire wizard was still sitting in front of the wooden table, whispering something to the magic mirror. He seemed to be unaware of Mustana's test. It doesn't look like it was done by this wizard. Could it be that I made a mistake? Mustana started pushing the eye of magic with a face full of doubt. However, just like before, the scene inside the crystal ball shook violently before it could get close to the legendary fire wizard. A red light flashed, and everything disappeared. Bastard, bastard, bastard. This time, Mustana was 100% sure that it was not his mistake that led to the failure of his peeping. Instead, the legendary fire wizard had used some sort of method to destroy his eye of magic. Damn it, what could it be? To be able to destroy the eye of magic that was protected by the power of destiny, the legendary fire wizard must be really powerful. Could it be some sort of law of fire that he had mastered? Judging from the red light that flashed before the eye of magic was destroyed, it seemed to be a unique characteristic of the fire element. But how did the wizard destroy the eye of magic without anyone noticing? Since the wizard's peeping had failed, Mustana decided to peep at the secret force behind him. The protection of destiny on him seemed to be the doing of that little girl from the north. Let me see what she's doing. From various sources, Mustana had heard of the beauty of the leader of the Witches of Destiny. Chapter 12:51. The crystal of prophecy first turned black, then slowly lit up. The scene that appeared in the crystal was a desolate dragonbone wasteland. Looking down from the sky, the place was covered in dark clouds, and weeds were everywhere. There were also some strange beasts and monsters roaming about. At the end of the line of sight, there was a strange tower standing alone, silently telling the world about the vicissitudes of time. This place did not have the colorful magic fluorescence of other wizard towers, nor did it have the bustling flow of people and the row upon row of ancillary buildings of other wizard towers. The entire Dragonbone wasteland was filled with nothing but sadness and desolation. Apart from that, there were no other feelings. These witches of destiny are living a tough life. Let me console you later. Mustana snickered as he slowly moved the eye of destiny towards the Tower of Destiny. Will of Fate, turn. Let me see what that Alice is doing. As he chanted the incantation, Mustana cut his right index finger with his fingernail and used his blood to draw a strange rune that looked like an end on the crystal of prophecy. The blood was quickly absorbed, and the cloudy scene in the crystal ball began to shake. The clouds and fog began to fade, as if they were being driven by enlightenment. However, just as the illusory scene was about to appear, the crystal ball suddenly lit up with a blinding white light. Mustana's eyes were filled with tears. When he calmed down and wiped his tears, the crystal ball was once again filled with the fog of destiny. He could no longer see anything clearly. Bastard, bastard. Is Alice using the power of destiny to protect herself all the time? I didn't see anything at all. Mustana cursed angrily with a resentful look on his face. However, he had many ways to spy on others. How could he be defeated by such a small setback? Although that Alice protected herself tightly, she couldn't possibly protect the people around her as well, right? The frustration on Mustana's face disappeared as he cut his finger and smeared it on the crystal ball again. He was still praying devoutly. Fate, oh fate, please let me see the guy who spent the most time with Alice in a day. Looking at the top of the tower, energy was surging. The majestic power of destiny was lingering near the astrological platform, surging with the elemental energy in the surroundings, coupling with each other, presenting a colorful and gorgeous scene. Under the influence of the strange power of fate, the prophecy crystal dissipated, and the scene quickly changed. In the end, it fixed on a girl lying on a wooden table, studying divination seriously. This was a young girl with waist-length golden hair and a delicate and perfect face. At this moment, she was holding a small wooden hammer in one hand and pressing a tortoise shell in the other. She muttered angrily as she hammered the tortoise shell. "How can it be smashed to pieces? The tortoise shell is so hard, and you only gave me a wooden hammer. Humph! Can't you change it to a golden hammer, even if it's made of iron?" After hammering for a while, the young girl seemed to have realized that it was useless. She threw the wooden hammer away and pushed aside the miscellaneous items on the table. She then took out a thick book on witchcraft and continued to study it. Destiny is one of the greatest rule forces in the world. Only by mastering the power of destiny can one control the trajectory of one's life and transcend the river of destiny. The young girl could not help but feel angry when she read up to this point. Transcend fate. What's the use of that? I can only look but not intervene. Once I intervene, I'll be devoured by destiny. Humph! What's the future of this profession? The young girl seemed to have no patience to study the understanding and feelings of the senior magi about the power of destiny. She pushed the book away and rolled around on the wooden table out of boredom. The power of destiny. The power of destiny. Alice always said that as long as I follow the guidance of destiny, I'll be favored by the power of destiny. But I can already control the power of destiny, but she doesn't teach me any of the witchcraft of destiny. Humph, how stingy. Mustana could not help but be surprised as he looked at the young girl who disrespected the power of destiny. For some reason, the moment Mustana saw her, he felt as though he had seen a torrent of destiny rushing towards him. It was different from the power of destiny in the Magus world, but it was indescribably similar. It was strange and mysterious, and it could not be explained or described with words. Destiny's child. There was no need to examine or appraise her. The moment Mustana saw the young girl, he was certain that she was the Dimension's child who had suddenly appeared 100 years ago and then disappeared without a trace. It seemed like Alice had always hidden her in the Tower of Destiny to avoid the disturbances and prying eyes of the outside world. Mustana had only heard of the name Destiny's Child from books, but he had no idea how powerful and magical they were. Hence, out of curiosity, Mustana activated the power of destiny and slowly pulled the camera towards the young girl. The young girl who was rolling around on the wooden table suddenly raised her head. Her two bright and beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at a certain void in the room, as though something interesting was happening there. Mustana's perverted gaze met the young girl's through the crystal ball. Both of them looked at each other and observed each other, as though they were curious about each other. Could it be that the young girl could see the eye of magic? Mustana tried to move the eye of magic slowly in the void, and the young girl's little head moved along with it. Her gaze was fixed on the invisible position of the eye of magic. Damn it, she can really see it. Uncle, how did you get those strange eyes of yours? Can you teach me? After saying that, the young girl waved her hand, and the eye of magic shook. The next moment, the scene in the crystal ball stabilized, and a huge face and a beautiful blinking eye appeared in front of Mustana. Somehow, the eye of magic that Mustana had condensed using the power of destiny had fallen into the hands of the young girl. She held it in front of her eyes and looked curiously into it. Bastard, that's my eye of magic. Mustana was shocked and furious. However, no matter how hard he tried to control the crystal ball, he could not take back the control of the eye of magic from the young girl. It was as though the power of destiny was no longer under Mustana's control. Instead, it had become her plaything. Mustana was instantly terrified. He was never afraid of going against destiny. He also had ways to deal with destiny's counterattack, but he had never heard of such an ability and method to seize another person's power of destiny and instantly assimilate it into one's own power. Damn it, damn it, damn it. The child of destiny is indeed a monster. The young girl who was so petite and adorable in his eyes just a moment ago had turned into a terrifying demon from the abyss world in the next moment. Mustana instantly cut off the connection between the prophecy crystal and the destiny in the distance. The clouds in the crystal ball surged, and it was once again shrouded by the thick fog of destiny. This is bad. With the help of the Child of Destiny, Alice will definitely be able to suppress me in terms of the power of destiny. It seems like I'll have to avoid provoking those fellows in the north for a period of time. Then, I'll encourage Domhnall to deal with this. Mustana paced back and forth on the astrological platform in exasperation. However, just as he was gritting his teeth and thinking of all sorts of ways to deal with the detestable Child of Destiny, his body suddenly froze. He slowly turned around and raised his head, his eyes staring unblinkingly at an empty space not far away. There, after a strange disturbance of the power of destiny, a familiar eye of magic slowly condensed. After blinking a few times, it pointed straight at him. "Uncle, we meet again." After flexing his fingers, the astrological platform at the top of the Overlook Tower suddenly burst into a tragic scream. No. Overlook Tower, level 216. In a spacious and brightly lit Magus residence, Grimm was leisurely sitting opposite a Magus, happily chatting with him. The one who came to visit him was also a fire Magus, Schreiber. He had been a grade 4 Magus for more than 300 years. His purpose for coming here was simple and clear. He wanted to exchange some insights on the law of fire with Grimm. At the end of the day, he wanted to observe and comprehend the law of fire that the other party had mastered. Of course, the law of fire that every high-ranked elemental magus had mastered was their own secret. It was also their trump card, and it was impossible for them to reveal everything to an outsider. However, if they met a partner with similar or identical attributes, they could choose some things that were not too sensitive to them to discuss. It was also a shortcut to improve each other's skills. Schreiber seemed to be worried that Grimm would have some misgivings. After making his request, he instantly condensed 3 fire runes in the air. Every rune rotated slowly, releasing wisps of strange laws of power from within. These are the 3 laws of fire that I have mastered: increased range of fire, frenzy of fire, and impact of fire. Flame amplification, able to increase the range of all offensive fire spells. Frenzy of fire allows the user to move faster while protected by flames. Impact of fire gives all offensive fire spells an additional resistance halo effect. After a brief introduction of the 3 types of flame runes, Schreiber looked at Grimm with a smile. Chapter 1252. Leyland had only grasped 3 laws of fire? Such a thought was extremely childish and laughable. As a veteran magus who had advanced to rank for more than 300 years ago, Schreiber had grasped more than 3 laws of fire. Hence, the ones he took out this time were the ones that were not as sensitive. Grimm smiled as he listened to Schreiber's introduction, quietly sizing up the 3 flame runes floating in front of him. Without Schreiber's permission, he naturally could not extend his spiritual force into the runes to investigate their structure and how they worked. He could only vaguely feel the aura of the law. Although he had condensed flame runes countless times in the past, they were all low-grade runes. He used the twisted energy nodes to construct a small magic circuit to simulate a special flame effect. However, ever since he'd entered the level of the law of fire, Grimm's strength had gradually fallen behind. Everything he grasped was actually simulated by the AI chip through large amounts of data, and he was just using it as a controller mindlessly. His strength had always been built on the AI chip's powerful calculations and simulations, as well as the support of many powerful magic tools. His own comprehension of the power of laws was still a little weak. In truth, before Schreiber had taken out the runes, Grimm had not even realized that something as illusory as the law of fire could be materialized like this. Schreiber's small action was like a bolt from the blue, opening up a brand new path for Grimm to train in. As he pondered silently, Grimm quickly filtered through his mind, trying to choose a few suitable ones from the 7 laws of fire he grasped to trade. Fire range, power fire, fire penetration, fire invisibility, fire critical, fire vulnerability, fire tenacity. Increased range had already overlapped with Schreiber's, so he naturally had to exclude them. Fire critical and fire invisibility were extremely useful to Grimm in battle, so he could not trade them either. However, the remaining ones were not that rare, and trading them would not affect Grimm in any way. Hence, Grimm quickly chose the 3 laws of fire he wanted to trade with. Grimm extended his right hand and waved it in the air. Fire energy imprinted one strange law rune after another in the air. The moment the law rune took shape, a mysterious flame immediately lingered over it and quietly burned in the air. These flames were not ordinary flames. They were completely golden in color and did not require the help of burning objects or air. Even in a vacuum with nothing, it could still burn calmly and gently. Their burning never radiates light or heat. It was like a beautiful and still portrait. If one did not see it with their own eyes, most people would not be able to detect its existence. What they ignited was the law of fire, and they also borrowed the power of the law, so their power was naturally thousands of times stronger than ordinary flames. The effects of the fire wizard spells that were constructed with them were frighteningly terrifying. In fact, before Grimm extended his finger, he did not even have the slightest trace of these law runes in his mind. However, when his mind was immersed in the corresponding law of fire, a strange law power surged in his sea of consciousness. Therefore, he wasn't drawing any nomological runes at all. Instead, he was drawing his own true understanding of the fire nomological laws. His strong spiritual consciousness flowed and turned freely in the air along with the flame energy, inadvertently materializing the various laws of fire into strange runes of strange shapes. When he put down his arm and turned to look at the 3 strange law runes quietly floating in front of him, a strange feeling welled up in his heart. The previously blurry and unfamiliar law of fire suddenly became concrete and clear. They also transformed into strange law runes in his mind and started to slowly imprint themselves on the core of his consciousness. Beep. Abnormal fluctuations detected in the host's consciousness. Warning. Warning. Abnormal changes detected in the core of the host's consciousness. The changes will greatly enhance the host, but the extent of the enhancement is unknown. Please indicate whether you want to stop it. Don't stop it. Beep. Command accepted. It's currently being monitored. Grimm opened his eyes, and what he saw was Schreiber's surprised and doubtful eyes. The expression on his face was extremely strange. When Schreiber saw that Grimm had woken up, he could not help but show a strange expression. Sir Grimm, could it be that this is your first time condensing law runes? At the end of his sentence, Schreiber's tone was filled with anger. Yes, I've been busy with other witchcraft experiments before, so I've never tried to materialize the law of fire. After seeing what you did today, I tried to condense them. Grimm explained in embarrassment. The more he explained, the more interesting Schreiber's expression became. He seemed to be struggling between believing and not believing Grimm's words. Liar, liar, liar. He's a big liar. If this is your first time condensing law runes, then what did you use to control the law of fire to fight before? Liar. This Grimm is a big liar. You can't believe a word he says. Schreiber's heart was roaring crazily. However, the strange aura that rose from Grimm's body when he was condensing law runes was obviously the external appearance of the law runes fusing with the core of his consciousness. There was no way that Grimm could fake this. What he had seen and heard made Schreiber completely believe Grimm's explanation, but this explanation obviously went against everything he knew. Schreiber was panting heavily, his eyes fixed on Grimm, trying to find a reason to lie and deceive from the young wizard's body and face. Unfortunately, all he saw was sincerity. This damned sincerity. Schreiber squeezed out a sinister smile on his face and forced himself to forget about his previous conjecture. With a deep and hoarse voice, he said fiercely, Sir Grimm, why don't you introduce these 3 law runes first? The law runes of any elemental wizard were the carriers of their spiritual will. Otherwise, they would not be able to use them as they wished. Without Grimm's permission, Schreiber would not be able to find out the specific effects of the law runes through their energy waves and aura. These are the 3 laws of fire I've mastered: flame penetration, fire vulnerability, and fire endurance. Flame penetration, as its name suggests, can penetrate the target's fire resistance and cause them to take more fire damage. While explaining, Grimm summoned the law rune of flame penetration to his fingertip and let it rotate slowly, emitting strange energy waves. Schreiber stared at the law rune of flame penetration with a calm expression. It was obvious that he was not moved by its effects. To put it bluntly, this fire wizard of the association had come to him on his own, which was why he was so calm. Grimm was not annoyed. With a wave of his hand, the law rune of flame penetration flew back to its original position and was replaced by a new law rune on his fingertip. Fire vulnerability. The user can reduce the target's fire resistance to negative values at the cost of 0 defense. This way, the user can deal more fire damage to the target. After hearing Grimm's introduction, Schreiber's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he was thinking about how to use the law of fire in a battle. To be honest, reducing one's defense to 0 during a battle was not a wise thing to do. However, in some special situations, when he needed to exert extreme pressure on his opponent, this could be a viable method. Grimm glanced at Schreiber, but he did not stop and replaced it with a new law rune. Tenacity of fire. The flames on the target's body will not extinguish by themselves when attacked by the user. This also means that in an intense battle, if the enemy does not have the time to extinguish the flames on their body, they will have to bear the damage of the flames. Schreiber's eyes finally lit up after hearing the effects of the law of fire. Although Grimm's explanation was very vague, as a veteran fire wizard, he could easily understand the sinister nature of the law of fire. During a battle, even if ordinary elemental flames burned the opponent's body, they would be extinguished due to the cut-off of the elemental channel. However, the special law of fire attached to the flames would last forever unless there was a special law spell to deal with it. For high-grade magi, where every second mattered, this was an easy and cheap way to deal with the enemy. Such a law of fire truly had a trace of a magus of laws. Schreiber could not help but feel his breath quicken. Although they were both the law of fire, there were differences between different laws. Increased fire range, extreme fire effect, fire penetration, fire strengthening, and fire frenzy belonged to the lowest level. On the other hand, fire vulnerability, fire impact, and tenacity of fire were of a higher level, and the effects of these laws were much stronger. To be honest, although Schreiber had a high evaluation of Grimm, he did not expect him to be able to take out such a high-level law so easily. And this was obviously not Grimm's true trump card. Schreiber's heart was burning with passion when he thought about the invisible fire spell that Grimm had used in the battle against the Witch of Torture and the special double damage effect. Unfortunately, those 2 laws of fire were obviously the core of Grimm's fighting style, so it was impossible for him to trade them. Chapter 1253. Half a day later, the trade was completed. Schreiber had exchanged flame impact for Grimm's endurance of fire. After exchanging the law runes, Schreiber left excitedly. He was obviously in a hurry to comprehend the law of fire. However, this trade was not a one-off deal, and there were many follow-up matters. Even if Schreiber had obtained the law of fire endurance rune, if he wanted to successfully analyze the law of fire from it and solidify it into a part of his fire instinct, the probability of success was still quite low. There were many types of laws in the world of fire. When the same law of fire was used on different magi, the effects of the law would be different. Some were stronger, while others were weaker. For example, Grimm's range was increased from 3,000 to 5,000 meters, while Schreiber's range was increased to 6,000 meters. Most of the time, the strength of a law of fire was related to the caster's affinity with it. The higher the affinity, the stronger the power of the law. The lower the affinity, the weaker the power of the law. Most of the energy levels summarized in the books of sorcery were in the middle, and they belonged to the average score after a comprehensive evaluation. If Schreiber's affinity with fire was extremely high, there was a high probability that he would be able to successfully analyze the law of fire. On the other hand, if he failed, he would only gain a little more comprehension of the law of fire. Both sides were well aware of this, and it was still uncertain who would gain the upper hand in this trade. However, with the help of the AI chip, the chances of Grimm failing to analyze the law rune flame impact were almost zero. After sending Schreiber off, Grimm opened the restrictions of his residence and sealed himself up. This was the Magus Association's territory after all, so it was not suitable for him to do things that were too secretive. However, with the Shadow Fiend as a guard, his safety was guaranteed. Grimm hid in the secret room, and the first thing he did was to do a thorough self-examination. He lay flat on a luxurious bed, and his consciousness immediately sank into the depths of his boundless sea of consciousness. Grimm had an affinity with the fire element, so his sea of consciousness had turned into a boundless sea of flames. The flames burned silently, and the entire world was crimson red. In the center of the sea of flames, a sparkling and translucent crimson crystal floated above the sea of flames. No matter how ferocious the waves of fire below were, it remained motionless, quietly and peacefully frozen there. But when he got closer, he could see the turbulent winds and clouds within the crystal through the countless fine and flat surfaces. It seemed to contain an extremely terrifying world of flames. But at that moment, 3 law runes that were still burning with golden flames descended from the sky and floated around the scarlet crystal. They flew around randomly, as if searching for their rightful place. When Grimm's consciousness descended upon this strange world, the entire world immediately became lively and restless. The core of the consciousness wasn't a substance that truly existed, but rather a projection of the soul, flesh, and consciousness of a higher intelligent life form. Its existence was incomparably important to intelligent life. If the most important thing for an anatomy refinery sorcerer was the fusion of his spiritual consciousness and flesh, then the most important thing for an elemental sorcerer was the deep fusion of his soul and spiritual consciousness. Therefore, anatomy refinery sorcerers pursued an immortal body. They used various methods to repeatedly temper their flesh, and finally even fuse their spiritual consciousness into it. They used the strength and immortality of their flesh to fuse with themselves, reaching a higher level of life. Most elemental sorcerers would disregard their flesh and single-handedly strengthen their soul and spiritual consciousness so that they could leave their body without their soul being destroyed. After all, the soul and spiritual consciousness were illusory, so they still needed a carrier. Therefore, elemental sorcerers used the projection of their consciousness as a special carrier to carry their soul and spiritual consciousness. That way, even if their physical body was completely destroyed, they could continue to live in a pure energy form. This was especially true when elemental sorcerers leveled up to law-defying sorcerers. What they entrusted their soul and spiritual consciousness to was no longer their illusory core of consciousness, but the laws of the plane that they controlled. They disassembled their own consciousness into countless fragments of consciousness and embedded them into the laws of the plane world. That way, as long as the law system existed, their souls would truly be immortal. Even if their flesh was completely destroyed by the enemy and all their descendants were killed, as long as the plane law was still operating, they would one day regain their consciousness along with the fusion of the fragments of consciousness. Take Alice as an example. The first Witch of Destiny had left the sorcerer's world for tens of thousands of years, but her powers still continued to influence the sorcerer's world's world will. Even if there were nearly 1,000 years of severed inheritance in between, as long as the plane law system did not collapse, then the fragments of consciousness left by the first Witch of Destiny, Medusa, would spread and circulate in the entire world along with the operation of the plane law. When these fragments of consciousness fused to a certain extent, they would conform to a certain plane law, and a new round of Battle of Destiny would immediately appear. All the little fellows who had unconsciously fused with Medusa's fragments of consciousness would become her consciousness carriers. Under the guidance of a strange power of destiny, They would gather together and frantically kill and devour. In the end, a complete new Medusa was born. From a moment this new Medusa was born, her body carried the power of destiny accumulated by the Witch of Destiny for nearly 1,000 years. When she advanced to rank 5 and stepped out of the sorcerer's world, it was the moment when the new Medusa and the old Medusa chose to fuse. Relying on this method of continuous accumulation and fusion. Even if Medusa had left the sorcerer's world for tens of thousands of years, she still continued to absorb the power of destiny from here. A little insect that was chased out of the plane was still continuously sucking its blood. This was obviously something the world would not allow. Thus, after going through several reincarnations, the world will finally retaliated. His counterattack was to borrow Alice's hand to cut off Medusa's continuous reincarnation of the struggle for destiny, and then cleanse the law of destiny, clearing away the unreasonable parts that could bring harm to the sorcerer world. However, the world did not have limbs, and naturally could not complete this task by itself. Thus, it chose to protect Alice and Grimm, who had always been opposing the Medusa, and used their hands to complete this grand and vast task. If Grimm was said to be ignorant of this before, now that he had advanced to rank 4, his connection with the world was getting closer and closer, and he had a deeper understanding of this historical mission that had been imposed on him. Especially now, when Grimm's mind was completely immersed in this sea of consciousness. He could even clearly feel the joy, anger, anxiety, and anticipation of the world. Well, after all, the sorcerer's world was too big, and the plane's consciousness that it had condensed could not be as sensitive and swift as ordinary intelligent beings. Most of the time, it was like a giant baby with a bad temper, only relying on instinct to express its joy and anger, unable to express more intuitive feelings and emotions. However, in the subconscious of the sorcerer's world's consciousness, Grimm was clearly classified as one of their own. This was especially evident during Grimm's advancement and improvement. After Grimm's consciousness returned to the core, the consciousness projection space immediately gained a soul. The violent sea of fire set off wave after wave of tyrannical and crazy flame waves, and the entire space began to burn, making the final preparations for the upcoming soul transition. Grimm's consciousness appeared above the crimson crystal. He looked at the clamorous world of flames and began to condense the other law runes without hesitation. Fire range, power fire, fire penetration, fire invisibility, fire impact, fire critical strike, fire vulnerability, fire endurance, 8 strange runes condensed with refined laws of fire revolved around the crimson crystal, colliding with it from time to time, creating dazzling sparks. Their unconscious actions caused the core of consciousness to tremble slightly, and even the fiery world began to tremble uneasily. If the law runes were allowed to collide with the core of the consciousness, it would cause the space of consciousness to tremble. No matter how talented Grimm was, he would not be able to avoid the pain of the turbulence in his consciousness. Seeing this, Grimm naturally did not ignore it. He began to extend his consciousness tentacles in an attempt to draw the law runes into the core of the consciousness. However, it was a pity that there seemed to be a strong repulsive force between the law runes. It was extremely difficult for them to peacefully fuse with the core of the consciousness. Chip, what's going on? Why is there such a strong repulsive force between them? Aren't they the laws of fire I condensed? Grimm could not understand, no matter how hard he thought about it. Beep. Host has missed the best time to fuse with the law runes. The best time? When is that? The moment Host comprehended the first law rune. Other magi will not be able to grasp multiple law runes in a short period of time. Every time they grasp a law rune, they'll fuse it into the core of the consciousness. After a long period of time and medication, they'll adjust the core of the consciousness so that it can accept the second law rune. That's why it's much easier for them to fuse with the law runes, and it's also much safer. Host, on the other hand, relies on data processing to obtain a large number of law runes. Choosing to fuse with 8 law runes on his first try is naturally 8 times more difficult than ordinary magi. Chapter 1254. Someone else had to do it 8 times, yet he wanted to do it all at once. No wonder the fusion of the law runes was so difficult. Grim sighed inwardly. He could only place his hopes on the chip. Chip. Look around and see if there's any way to solve this problem. This soul transition opportunity is very precious, and I don't want to waste it because of a low-level mistake. Beep. The difficulty lies in the strength of the host's soul. It has not reached the peak of rank 4 and is unable to restrain 8 law runes. There are 2 ways to solve this. First, give up on most of the law runes and only fuse a portion. Based on the host's spiritual force, the number of law runes that could be contained is 4. Grim listened quietly. He knew that his spiritual force was only at 44 points. This meant that after reaching rank 4, every increase in his spiritual force would allow him to contain 1 more law rune. When he reached the peak of rank 4 and gathered 10 law runes, he would have the chance to fuse them into his own unique law of fire. At that time, Grim would successfully advance to rank 5. In other words, Grim was not controlling the laws of fire of some plane, but his own unique law of fire. This allowed a rank 5 magus to break free from the shackles of the laws of this plane, allowing him to unleash power that far surpassed the limits of the plane. Give up on a portion of the law runes? This won't affect me in any way, will it? Grim asked carefully. Beep. The law runes that are given up will automatically disappear, and the host will forget about them. Also, there's a limit to the number of times the core of the consciousness can be modified. This number is related to the strength of the soul and the tenacity of the consciousness. If these conditions are not met, the number of times the core of the consciousness can withstand will decrease. Grim's heart trembled, and he could not help but ask. In the Magus books, the limits of a Magus potential are repeatedly mentioned. Does this have something to do with the number of modifications the core of the consciousness can withstand? Based on the current information, there's a chance that the host's judgment is correct. Those magi whose potential is considered to be at the middle of rank 4 are most likely because their cores can only be modified by runes 5 to 6 times, which is too far away from the 10 times required to advance to rank 5. Understood. Now, I finally understand what the so-called limit of potential development represents. Grim sighed. A person's basic physique, the strength of the soul, and the potential of a sorcerer. These factors determine the strength of the heart core. This strength, in turn, limits the highest level he can reach. It seems that the conscious improvement of the rank 4 sorcerers from the body to the soul is indeed beneficial to a certain extent. Beep. The congenital quality is the main factor. The adjustments and optimizations in the later stage can only slightly improve the potential and aptitude. It is impossible to fundamentally change one's destiny. What about me? Chip, can you determine the limits of my potential? Beep. Limited by the strength of the Chip, it can only detect that the host development limit is above rank 5. If a more detailed and accurate judgment of the limits of the host potential is required, the host will need to provide more spiritual force to support it. By the way, you mentioned that there are 2 ways to solve the current situation. What's the other one? Beep. If the host isn't willing to give up on the law runes in his hands, he'll need a powerful core to bear the backlash of the fusion in his place. And the only one around the host that satisfies this condition is Divine Fire Bead. Grim sighed in amazement. At the same time, he instantly understood the meaning of the Chip's prompt. The amount of time he had spent advancing was still too short. 80 years of accumulation and tempering was long enough for a regular human, but it was still too short for a grade 4 magus whose lifespan had already reached 1,000 years. Grim had used 80 years to surpass the 500 or 600 years of accumulation of others. Now, however, his own spiritual force had become his shortcoming, dragging down his overall progress. This was something that could not be rushed, since his spiritual force was not enough to support the fusion of the 8 law runes. He would use the Divine Fire Bead to replace himself. A rank 5 Divine Fire Bead was more than enough to replace a mid-grade 4 Fire Magus like himself. With 2 different choices in front of him, Grimm could not help but hesitate. One was to do it himself, giving up on the other 4 law runes and only fuse with the 4 he had chosen. The other was to use the Divine Fire Bead to replace himself and fuse all 8 law runes. Chip, which of these 2 options is better? Beep. In terms of future development potential, I suggest the host choose the first option. Give up on the 4 laws of fire? You said that once I give up on them, I'll forget them forever. That's 4 laws of fire we're talking about. It's already so difficult for regular magi to obtain even one, yet you want me to give up on all 4. What's the reason? From the current information, the prerequisite for advancing to rank 5 is to grasp a sufficient number of laws of the plane and fuse them into your own unique power of law. In this process, the basic law of fire chosen by the host will determine the power of the fused flames. Grimm sucked in a breath of cold air. You mean to say that the laws of fire cannot be fused casually, and that I have to tailor them to prepare for my future advancement, only choosing the ones that are suitable for me? Yes, the reliability of this conjecture is very high. The flames of law that the host may produce in the future are directly related to the laws of fire you choose to fuse with. If there is a conflict between the laws of fire you choose to fuse with, it will definitely weaken the power of the flames of law in the future. Hearing the AI Chip's conjecture, Grimm instantly understood why the 3 great Magus organizations were always stronger than the scattered forces. The most fundamental reason was probably the accumulation and inheritance of legacies. For a rank 4 Magus like Grimm, if he were born in one of the 3 great Magus organizations, the moment he advanced, he would probably receive the resources and guidance of the organization. It was simply impossible for Grimm to make such a low-level mistake, where he had already grasped 7 laws of fire, but had never tried to fuse them with the core of his consciousness. Only in a chaotic place like the central continent, like the Forest of Towers, where high-level knowledge and advanced spell-casting techniques were monopolized by the major families, normal wizards had no guidance when they leveled up. It was like a blind man riding a blind horse, relying purely on luck and resources to force their way through. Even Grimm, who lacked the necessary guidance, had made such an inconceivably expensive joke. Chip, how should I choose between these 8 laws of fire? Don't you have a plan? Beep. It's time for the host to make a choice. You have to choose between the 8 law runes, and the choice will be based on the path that the host will take in the future. Explain in detail. Fire is an abnormally lively and violent magic element, and is one of the 4 basic elements. It has great potential for development, and its might is astonishing. However, the world of fire has countless different paths of development. For example, there are explosive paths that focus on short-term fire attacks, destructive paths that focus on continuous fire damage, explosive paths that focus on fire mobility, and control paths that focus on fire special effects. There are many paths, and the host is advised to choose one based on his preferences and current circumstances. As for the other paths of development, it's better to wait until you reach rank 5 before making them up. Grimm nodded his head silently. In the past, his thoughts about advancing to rank 5 had been hazy. However, after listening to the AI Chip's explanation, he had an idea, and the path he should take was clear at a glance. Of the 8 laws of fire that he currently grasped, Amplify Flame, Strengthen Flame, and Penetrate Flame were basic laws of fire that were suitable for any type of fire. Flame Invisibility and Flame Impact were fire special effects that focused on damage control. Fire Vulnerability and Flame Critical Strike were explosive types that dealt a large amount of damage in a short period of time, while Tenacity of Fire was obviously destructive. From the high-grade laws of fire that he currently grasped, regardless of whether he walked the path of damage control or explosive attacks, he had a good foundation for development. As for how he would choose, it would depend on his preferences. Damage control. Explosive damage. Grimm closed his eyes and pondered silently. In fact, Grimm was the only one who could enjoy this kind of trouble. Other rank 4 elemental magi would be overjoyed to be able to comprehend a single elemental law. How could they be picky like him, thinking about the direction he would take after advancing to rank 5? Other elemental magi would naturally fuse with whatever they comprehended. No one had the foresight and vision to consider the future. As for what they would obtain after advancing to rank 5, that was naturally up to fate. This was also the main reason why magi did everything they could to curry favor with the plane's consciousness. If the plane's consciousness protected you, it would naturally give you a rather decent law ability. If the plane's consciousness hated you, the law ability it gave back would naturally be trash. As a member of a plane, any individual would inevitably be dominated and controlled by the plane's consciousness. The only difference was the degree of control. In future high-grade battles, if Grimm still preferred to do it himself, then explosive attacks would be his only choice. However, if he did not want to take such a huge risk, controlling attacks would be his best choice. As for the real damage, it was best to leave it to the devil puppets who did not fear death. Chapter 1255. Following Grimm's choice, the 4 law runes circling around the crimson crystal silently dissipated. At the same time, Grimm felt a sharp pain in his mind. The law of fire related to it was also erased by mysterious power. The erasure was so clean that even the law comprehension and high-level knowledge in Grimm's consciousness disappeared at the same time. Power of fire, fire vulnerability, fire critical, fire tenacity. These laws of fire that other fire wizards could only dream of disappeared one by one. Not even a trace of them was left behind. The 4 remaining law runes represented the fire amplification, fire penetration, fire invisibility, and fire impact, respectively. They continue to circle around the crimson crystal formed by the core of his consciousness. They could not leave, but they were unwilling to be bound and smelted, so they continued to collide with each other. However, at this moment, this strange world of monstrous flames appeared. A gigantic radiant sun appeared, slowly descending from the dark red sky. The divine fire orb. No, more accurately, it was the energy projection of the divine fire orb. Under Grimm's control, the divine fire orb projected its power into his consciousness and slowly moved towards the crimson crystal that represented the core of his consciousness. The law runes were unwilling to be bound and continued to struggle, but they could not merge with the core of his consciousness. However, the divine fire orb's power was completely controlled by Grimm, and it merged with the crimson crystal without hesitation. With this extremely powerful external aid, the crimson crystal's control over the 4 law runes increased greatly. The 4 law runes trembled slightly and let out howls like defeated dogs, but they could not change their fate of being slowly drawn to the crimson crystal. The law runes finally became docile and obediently moved closer to the crimson crystal, branding themselves on it. The fusion of the law runes and the core of his consciousness meant that his soul would be greatly modified, and the shock and pain that came with it would be difficult for those who had not experienced it themselves to understand. Other magi would fuse with the law runes one by one, and they would need at least 100 years to settle and buffer, so it would not cause too much damage to his soul. However, Grimm obviously did not have the time to spend 300 or 400 years slowly preparing all of this. Thus, he summoned the energy projection of the fire god Pearl and used it as the core of his power to bind the 4 law runes, making them obediently choose to fuse with his consciousness core. The divine fire bead's energy projection had also absorbed most of the impact on his soul during the fusion process. Otherwise, Grimm would not have been able to endure it. The transformation of the core of the consciousness also meant that the level of the soul's main body's power would increase. Although Grimm's combat strength would weaken in the short term due to the disappearance of several fire laws, in the long term, It would bring indescribable benefits to his development potential and his future path of fire. Furthermore, Grimm had the help of the AI chip and the Vulcan orb, a fire elemental treasure. It would be 100 times easier for him to comprehend a new law of fire compared to regular elemental magi. However, he had already made his choice on the path of the flame element. He could no longer recklessly develop it, as he had before. It took Grimm 27 days to complete the fusion. Even with his 33-point vitality, when he first stepped out of the secret chamber, he still felt a strange feeling of weakness and dizziness. However, the sublimation of his soul after fusing with the law runes had allowed Grimm's consciousness to become unprecedentedly clear and powerful. The swelling feeling of power in the depths of his soul that he hadn't felt in a long time made him feel intoxicated. His spiritual force was still at 44 points, but the ability of his main body to control his body and consciousness had undergone an earth-shattering change. It was as if Grimm had stuffed the soul of a magus who comprehended laws into the body of an elemental magus. Although the body and consciousness were still the same, his main body's control over fire and understanding of the mysteries of fire had increased to a whole new level. However, the strength of Grimm's soul was still far from that of a true Grade 5 magus, but it was much stronger than that of a regular Grade 4 magus. These benefits could not be seen from the outside, but they would have a profound effect on Grimm's development. Grimm's spiritual force had undoubtedly weakened after a month of not moving, eating, or resting. However, his slightly pale, tough, and handsome face was filled with joy, and a dazzling red light that could captivate one's mind exploded in the depths of his black eyes. As soon as he stepped out of the secret chamber, the fireflies on the restriction outside attracted his attention. Spell information. Grimm hesitated for a moment, then slightly waved his hand, and a small crack appeared in the magic formation. The spell information that was randomly bumping into the restriction like headless flies swarmed in and flew in front of him. Grimm reached out his hand, and the spell information flew into his palm. It turned into an invisible stream of consciousness and fused into his mind. Immediately after, an unfamiliar mental language formed in his mind. Wizard Grimm, I'm quite interested in something in your hands. I'm looking forward to talking to you face to face. Wizard Grimm, I also have something that you might be interested in. How about we meet? Wizard Grimm, I'm Obiola. I'm eager to meet you. What's going on, Wizard Grimm? You'll definitely benefit from our meeting. You should reply to me. I'm about to go crazy. How could you go in a closed-door training at this time? I'm Obiola. I'm still waiting for your news. It's been 15 days. Why haven't you come out yet? Remember to contact me when you're out. The string of spell information came from the magus called Obiola. From the content of the information, Grimm could feel the change from calmness to doubt, and then to anxiety. It seemed like Grimm's unexpected closed-door training had almost driven a rank 4 magus crazy. Obiola? Grimm frowned slightly. The AI chip had already projected the basic information of Magus Obiola into his mind. Elder of the Magus Association. Rank 4 Magus. Summoner. Although the information he collected was extremely simple, Grimm could roughly guess the main purpose of the other party's eagerness to see him based on the superficial information. After arriving at the Mage Association, among the many items that he had revealed, that was probably the only thing that could attract this summoner. Truth be told, Grimm was not too willing to accept such a deal that came knocking on his door. After all, at his level, there weren't many things that could catch his attention and interest. Furthermore, he now had the Divine Fire Orb and the Wisdom Bible that he was about to finish devouring. With these two high-grade items, Grimm's strength was enough to suppress most Rank 4 Magi. Even if there were some peak Rank 4 Magi, Grimm was not afraid of them. Even in the heart of the Magus Association, as long as he did not fall out with them, Grimm was confident that he could escape if he was surrounded by a group of Rank 4 Magi in the Wizard's Tower. This was why he had the confidence to brazenly come out. Seeing that Obiola was eager to meet him, Grimm did not seem enthusiastic. He raised his arm and sniffed his smelly wizard robe, then turned around and walked into the bathroom without hesitation. For hours later, Grim, who had taken a bath, changed his clothes, and cleaned himself up, then opened the restriction with a hungry stomach. He summoned the servants of the wizard's pagoda and served him a sumptuous feast of magical energy. Most tier 4 sorcerers, especially elemental sorcerers, had already achieved energization or partial energization of their bodies. When necessary, they could even directly consume magical crystals to maintain their energy reserves. Compared to magical crystals, the energy contained in most food was too little. For a rank 4 magus, it was impossible to fill up their terrifying energy reserves without eating a few tons of food. Moreover, most of the food contained fragmented life energy. If one wanted to rely on the weak digestive and absorption system of humans to convert it into high-energy substances, the energy consumption was also extremely shocking. This meant that if a rank 4 magus wanted to replenish their energy reserves, they could only rely on some high-level magical creatures. However, it would be difficult to include these guys in the menu without putting in some effort. However, as the largest wizard organization in the sorcerer world, the Wizard Association had a large number of resource planes. The magical creatures in the dark forest of the sorcerer world were too powerful to capture, so they were moved to a secondary plane to be tamed. This way, with a complete plane to support them, the number of magical creatures would increase rapidly. These meticulously cultivated magical creatures would naturally be harvested by wizard teams regularly, becoming the source of high-energy food for the entire organization. If Grim hadn't occupied Lance's plane and had an uninterrupted supply of dragon meat, perhaps his body wouldn't have been so strong. However, just as Grim was eating heartily, an uninvited guest came to his house. "Wizard Grim, I'm Obiola. Can you see me at this hour?" Sensing the other party's mental voice, Grim hesitated for a moment, then finally opened the door. This residence belonged to the overlooked tower and was the property of the Wizard Association. However, as a guest of the association, as long as Grim stayed here for a day, this place would be considered his private territory. Even if Obiola had the title of an elder of the association, it was impossible for him to barge in. This was the basic courtesy and etiquette between wizards. The door opened, and a well-built man with a dignified expression strode in. When he saw Grim sitting at the table and wolfing down his food, he was stunned at first, then a look of understanding appeared on his face. Chapter 1256. A moment later, a wooden chair and a set of cutlery were placed at the other end of the long dining table. Obiola began to bury his head in his food and drink. It took him an entire hour to crazily eat, and only then did the burning hunger in his stomach subside a little. Inside Grim's body, the rule core was also pulsing violently, pumping out extremely pure flame energy to every part of his body. Compared to the past, the amount of flame energy was much thinner, but the aura of laws within it was extraordinarily dense. To a certain extent, it had already reached the level of divinity. Divinity, this word had a completely different meaning in the mouth of magi than in the world of gods. It did not represent holiness or greatness, but purity and perfection. After eliminating the conflicting laws of fire, the magic flames that Grim had condensed became more refined and pure. It even had a hint of the laws of fire. Now, he was walking on the same path as the flame monarch Gromus. Magus Obiola was rather straightforward, stuffing himself with food while sizing up Grim. "Magus Grim, did you train in some special spell? Why did your aura change so much?" After examining him for a long time, he could not help but speak. "If not for your soul undulations, I would not have been able to recognize you." Grim smiled indifferently at Obiola's straightforward question. "I had some problems with my soul, so I needed to go into seclusion urgently. Now that the problem has been resolved, my aura has naturally changed." "Problems with your soul? You suppressed Olivier with a problem with your soul. If there was no problem with your soul, wouldn't you be able to topple her easily? Ha ha ha. If Olivier hears about this, I'm afraid she'll come looking for you with all her might." "You can't say that," Grim said. "I've only resolved a small problem with my soul, and it won't have too great of an impact on my battle prowess. Even if I were to face Olivier again, it would be very difficult for me to gain the upper hand." Obviously, Obiola did not fully believe Grim's words of modesty. He stared at Grim for a long time before finally sighing. "Whether what you said is true or not, it's none of my damn business. I can't be bothered. Whether you're strong or weak, Domner might care, Olivier might care, but Obiola only cares about my own territory and nothing else." Hearing the other party's declaration, Grim finally took the initiative to ask, "Your Excellency, Obiola, may I know the reason for your urgent visit?" Upon hearing Grim's question, Obiola's spirit shook. A pair of big bell-like eyes immediately stared at Grim. He rubbed his hands and asked eagerly, "I heard from Olivier that you have a giant egg produced by a Tier 5 divine object?" Grim's heart skipped a beat as he silently nodded. "That's right, there is such a huge egg." Then, Obiola's expression became more and more urgent. "Can you let me appreciate it?" Grim raised his head and glanced at him. He waved his hand in front of his eyes and conjured a half-meter-tall fire mirror. As the items on it changed, they finally settled on a huge milky white egg. Grim gave it a gentle push, and the fire mirror slowly floated in front of Obiola. Through the fire mirror, the giant egg in the secret chamber of the Flame Monarch's wizard pagoda in the middle of the continent seemed to be right in front of him. Even the magical patterns and aura on it could be clearly seen. Suddenly seeing the strange object that he had been yearning for day and night, Obiola immediately abandoned all elegance and etiquette. He swept the plates, knives, and forks in front of him to the ground, pulled the fire mirror in front of him, and began to continuously cast spells to verify it. Unfortunately, the conditions were simple, and the methods that he could use were still too few. But even so, after a simple verification of the authenticity of the giant egg and the level of energy aura, Obiola's rough face still flashed with a hint of ecstasy. "This is a bird's egg. Lightning element. Life is still active. The mother of the giant egg should have advanced to Tier 5 more than 200 years ago. Congratulations, Wizard Grim. You should have taken advantage of the weak incubation period of this giant egg to kill it. Otherwise, even the Wizard Association would not have been able to get their hands on a Tier 5 divine object so easily." Obiola was indeed a veteran Tier 4 wizard. He was able to deduce so much information from just a few clues, and he described it in detail as if he had seen it with his own eyes. As the person involved, Grim could not help but secretly admire him. Speaking of which, Grim could not have been more fortunate in this matter. The Heisen Plane was originally a secondary plane belonging to the Scattered Forest Pagoda Association. It was precisely because of this divine object that the association had failed to invade it several times. However, they never would have thought that the Tier 5 divine object that they could not take down would be so easily killed by Grim's Shadow Fiend. As a result, the value of Grim's private treasure vault had risen by several levels in one go. After lowering his head and thinking for a moment, Obiola finally spoke his mind. "Wizard Grim, I want this giant egg." Grim did not reply, but looked at Obiola calmly. This was a giant egg born from a Tier 5 divine object, so one could imagine its actual value. Although the little guy that hatched would not immediately be Tier 5, it still had the possibility of advancing to Tier 5. In terms of value and appearance, such an item could be mentioned in the same breath as the Divine Stone of Light. However, the Divine Stone of Light could be used, while this giant egg still needed to be incubated and nurtured. If he wanted to nurture this little guy again, the amount of effort and resources he would need to spend would be terrifying. However, if he could obtain a powerful divine object with the potential of Tier 5 in the future, it would be a good choice, whether as a magic pet or a guardian wizard beast. Since Obiola knew the value of this giant egg, he would naturally not ask for it for nothing. Now, Grim was just waiting for Obiola to take out a bargaining chip that could move him. Otherwise, he would rather follow his original plan and sacrifice this giant egg to nourish his astral beast bloodline. Compared to his elemental talent, the power of his bloodline was still too weak. The main reason was that Grimm had only obtained the bloodline for a short period of time, so he had not fully unearthed the power of the bloodline. Therefore, he often looked for some special high-energy substances to stimulate the growth of his bloodline, which could be regarded as a way to increase his future combat power. Wizard Grimm, I solemnly recommend to you the undead spirit. With Obiola's drawn-out scream, a spirit body exuding a strong death aura emerged from the void. Its appearance was like a constantly wriggling white ball of smoke, with a vague face of a woman at its core. Ever since it appeared, the entire hall echoed with illusory wails and sorrowful cries. Even with Grimm's stable mind, he could not help but feel his mind tremble when he heard this strange sound. This is a Tier 4 intermediate undead spirit. As long as you master its resentment core, you can make it obediently fight for you. So, are you satisfied with this recommendation, sir? Obiola looked at Grimm fervently. Grimm did not answer, only snapping his fingers. Immediately after, a strange, pitch-black metal devil silently drilled out from the shadow behind him. Such a huge and heavy body stood in such a narrow shadow, but it did not give off a strange and abrupt feeling. Instead, its sharp claws flashed with a dark luster, giving off a soul-stirring feeling. This was a strange creation that combined the characteristics of a shadow creature and a construct creature. Looking at the shadow fiend floating behind Grimm, Obiola's words abruptly came to an abrupt halt. Then, he retrieved the undead specter in frustration. However, he immediately remembered the giant egg and forced himself to cheer up, taking out the second treasure. This is an undead feather. As long as you are willing, I can help you form a magic contract with a Tier 4 undead bird. This way, you will have a Tier 4 flying magic beast. Hearing Obiola's introduction, it was Grimm's turn to sigh. He tapped his forehead with his finger, and a special witchcraft contract emerged from it. The contract was written in ancient and mysterious dragon language, with the soul brand of Grimm and thunder dragon arms left on it. Looking at the content of the contract, it was not a common partner contract, but a forced summoning contract known as a slave contract. Obiola once again came to an abrupt halt. His face turned pale, and his eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. This was a slave contract. Moreover, the target of his enslavement was a powerful Tier 4 dragon. At this moment, Obiola felt the world spin, as if a small world in his heart was collapsing. Bastard. This Grimm is too much. I've taken out 2 precious treasures in a row, but I've failed miserably in front of him. This time, not to mention the others, even Obiola himself felt a little embarrassed. Ancient Gods Ruins. I have the coordinates of an ancient Gods Cemetery of Death. How about it? Are you interested? Ancient Gods Ruins, Grimm muttered to himself, and the AI chip at his mind quickly projected some relevant information. The ancient gods' ruins were not a product of the Magus world, but something from the world of gods. In order to avoid being hunted down by their enemies, some of the gods who had lost in the world of gods would push their divine kingdoms away from the plane and slip into the boundless depths of the Sea of Stars, drifting aimlessly there. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.